Tonight, a forgotten girl will become a duchess, and it will destroy everything. Welcome to a world where power wears silk and cruelty hides behind champagne glasses. This is the story of Elara Vance, the girl no one saw, and the duke who defied an empire to choose her. Stay until the end to see how a single choice can shatter a kingdom. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. Let's build this community together. The Ashmont Selection Ball wasn't a celebration. It was an execution disguised as a waltz. Elara Vance pressed herself against the marble column at the edge of the grand ballroom, her borrowed dress, a pale gray thing that had seen better seasons, almost blending into the stone. She'd learned long ago that invisibility was survival. In a room filled with the sharpest predators of the aristocracy, being seen meant being devoured. Crystal chandeliers blazed overhead, each one worth more than her entire existence. The ballroom stretched like a cathedral to excess, its floors polished to mirrors, its walls dripping with gold leaf and centuries of bloodline pride. 500 of the most powerful families in the realm had gathered for one purpose: to watch Duke Ryland Crowe select his bride. The rules were ancient and absolute. 10 noble ladies, chosen by the Dowager Duchess herself, would be presented. The Duke would dance with each. By midnight, he would claim one as his future wife. The decision was final. The marriage, inevitable. Elara wasn't one of the 10. She was here because Lady Margot Hastings, a second cousin of some minor branch, needed a companion, someone to hold her fan, fetch her wine, and make her look more important by comparison. It was the kind of work that paid in table scraps and humiliation. "Did you see the diamonds on Lady Cordelia?" a voice hissed nearby. 2 noble women in emerald silk had positioned themselves behind an ornamental palm, their fans fluttering like predatory wings. 3 generations of Thornbury wealth hanging from her neck. The Duke would be a fool not to choose her. "He'd be a bigger fool to choose anyone else," the other replied. "The Thornbury shipping empire alone could fund his military campaigns for a decade. And she's beautiful, in that cold, untouchable way men seem to worship." Elara studied the woman they discussed. Lady Cordelia Thornbury stood in a circle of admirers like a queen holding court, her posture perfect, her smile calculated to suggest warmth while promising none. Every gesture was rehearsed, every word weaponized. This was the game. Marriage as merger, love as leverage. The orchestra fell silent. A footman's voice rang out like a bell. "His Grace, Duke Ryland Crowe of Ashmont." The crowd parted like the sea before a storm. He entered alone. Elara had seen portraits, of course. Every household in the realm had one. But portraits lied. They softened. They romanticized. They couldn't capture the way he moved, like violence barely contained in formal dress. Couldn't capture the scar that cut through his left eyebrow, or the way his presence seemed to drop the temperature of the entire ballroom by several degrees. Duke Ryland Crowe was 32, a war hero with a list of victories that read like mythology, and absolutely the last man anyone would describe as romantic. His black coat fit him like armor. His cravat was tied with military precision. His expression suggested he'd rather be anywhere, a battlefield, a plague ward, a pit of vipers, than here. Behind him, moving with the slow inevitability of winter, came the Dowager Duchess Eugenia Crowe. If Ryland was the storm, she was the Ice Age. 70 years old, dressed in midnight purple that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, the Dowager had ruled the Ashmont Duchy for 4 decades, first through her husband, then through her son, and now through her grandson. She wore power like other women wore perfume, and everyone in the room could smell it. "The selection will now begin," the footman announced. The 10 chosen ladies formed a line, each one a masterpiece of breeding, beauty, and calculated ambition. Lady Cordelia Thornbury. Lady Isolde Vance, no relation to Elara, but the name still made her shrink further into shadow. Lady Seraphina Blackwell, whose father controlled half the coal in the Northern Territories. On and on, a parade of power and privilege. Ryland's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The Dowager leaned close to him, her whisper carrying just far enough. "Choose wisely, grandson. The duchy's future depends on tonight." Translation: "Choose who I tell you to choose, or suffer the consequences." The first dance began. Lady Cordelia glided into Ryland's arms with practiced grace, her smile bright enough to blind. They moved through the waltz with technical perfection, his hand at her waist, her hand on his shoulder, their bodies maintaining exactly the proper distance. To anyone watching, they looked like destiny. But Elara noticed what others missed. She always did. That was the advantage of being invisible. People forgot to guard their truth around you. Ryland's expression never changed. Not once. No warmth. No interest. No humanity. He danced like a man going through required motions before his own funeral. When the music ended, he released Lady Cordelia with a bow that managed to be both courteous and dismissive. "Thank you, Lady Thornberry. You dance beautifully." "The honor is mine, Your Grace." Cordelia's smile didn't waver, but Elara saw the flash of confusion in her eyes. She'd expected more. Everyone had. The second dance. Lady Isolde Vance, blonde and ethereal, practically floated across the floor. Same perfect form, same polite distance, same stone-faced duke. The third. Lady Seraphina, all dark eyes and dangerous curves, clearly trying to provoke some reaction. She leaned closer than propriety allowed, let her fingers trail just slightly too long on his shoulder. Ryland's expression remained glacial. By the fourth dance, whispers were spreading through the crowd like wildfire. He's not responding to any of them. What is he playing at? The Dowager looks ready to murder someone. Indeed, the Dowager's face had gone from ice to barely controlled fury. This wasn't how the script was supposed to go. Her grandson was meant to choose, preferably the lady she'd indicated with subtle nods and carefully arranged seating. Instead, he was treating each potential bride like an unwelcome duty. The dances continued, fifth, sixth, seventh, each one exactly like the last. Perfect form, zero emotion, growing tension that made the ballroom feel like a powder keg waiting for a spark. Elara watched it all from her corner, invisible and forgotten. Lady Margot had disappeared somewhere, probably showing off to other nobles about her proximity to the selection. Elara was supposed to wait by the refreshment table in case her employer needed anything. She was good at waiting, good at watching, good at being nothing. The 10th and final dance began. Lady Vivian Ashford, distant cousin to the Duke himself, moved through the waltz with desperate hope in her eyes. This was her last chance. The family's last chance. Surely blood would mean something. When the music ended, Ryland stepped back. The ballroom held its collective breath. The Dowager stepped forward, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Ryland, the selection is complete. Choose." For the first time all evening, emotion flickered across the Duke's face. Not joy, not relief. Rage. Pure, cold rage, gone so quickly most people missed it. But Elara saw. "I have observed all 10 ladies," Ryland said, his voice carrying to every corner of the massive room. "Each one is accomplished, beautiful, well-bred, everything this court values." The Dowager's eyes glittered with triumph. Finally, her grandson was playing along. However, that single word dropped like a guillotine blade. "None of them will be my Duchess." The ballroom erupted, gasps, shouts, the sound of 500 aristocrats forgetting their carefully cultivated composure all at once. The Dowager's face went white. "What? I reject them all." Ryland's voice cut through the chaos like steel through silk. "Every single one. You cannot. This is not." The Dowager was actually sputtering, her legendary control fracturing. "The selection is sacred, the process absolute. You must choose from the 10 presented." "I must choose a wife," Ryland corrected, his tone diamond hard. "The tradition says nothing about limiting my selection to your hand-picked candidates, grandmother." The emphasis on that last word made it sound like an insult. Elara felt something cold slide down her spine. This wasn't just rebellion. This was war. And she had the terrible feeling she knew what was coming next. "No, please, no." Ryland's eyes swept the ballroom, scanning faces with the precision of a general surveying a battlefield. His gaze passed over nobles, over servants, over... It stopped. On her. Every instinct Elara possessed screamed at her to run, to disappear completely. But she was frozen, pinned like a butterfly on display by those ice-gray eyes that suddenly saw everything she'd spent years trying to hide. He moved toward her. The crowd parted, confusion replacing shock. Your Grace, someone called out, bewildered. There's nothing over there but the companion girls. Reland stopped directly in front of Elara. Up close, he was even more terrifying, tall enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, broad enough to block out half the ballroom. The scar through his eyebrow was a pale line against tanned skin. His expression was unreadable. Your name, he said. Not a question, a command. Her voice came out barely a whisper. Elara Vance, Your Grace. Who do you serve? Lady Margot Hastings. I'm her companion. Something flickered in his eyes. Not kindness, not pity. Something harder, more dangerous. He turned to face the ballroom, and his next words destroyed her entire world. I choose her. Silence. Complete, absolute silence, as if every person in the room had forgotten how to breathe. Then, chaos. What? This is madness. She's nobody. A companion, a paid servant. The dowager's voice cut through the uproar like a whip crack. Ryland Crowe, have you lost your mind? I choose Elara Vance as my future duchess, Ryland repeated, his voice never rising, never wavering. The selection is complete. Alara's knees threatened to give out. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. She was a ghost, a shadow. She'd spent 23 years perfecting the art of being overlooked, and now this insane, scarred, terrifying duke had just dragged her into a spotlight that would burn her alive. She has no title, someone shouted. No fortune. No family worth mentioning. She's wearing a dress that looks like it was made for her grandmother. That last observation came from Lady Cordelia, and the crowd tittered with vicious agreement. Elara felt her face burn with humiliation. Every fear, every inadequacy, every reason she'd spent her life in shadows was now being announced to the entire aristocracy like a list of crimes. Ryland didn't even glance at the crowd. His eyes stayed locked on her. Do you accept? The question was quiet, meant only for her. And in his eyes, those cold, battle-hardened eyes, she saw something unexpected. A dare. He was testing her, not cruelly, not mockingly. He was asking if she had the spine to stand here while the entire world tried to tear her apart. She thought of every year spent bowing her head, every insult swallowed, every room she'd hidden in while nobles debated her worth like she wasn't human. She thought of Lady Margot's casual cruelty, of working 12 hours a day for enough coin to rent a closet-sized room, of the future that stretched ahead, years of invisibility, then death, then nothing. And she thought, what do I have to lose? I accept your grace. Her voice didn't shake. Somehow, impossibly, it came out clear and steady. The ballroom exploded. Nobles surged forward, shouting protests, demanding explanations. The dowager looked ready to commit murder. The 10 rejected ladies stared at Elara like she was a plague rat that had somehow wandered into a tea party. Ryland raised one hand. Somehow, that single gesture brought silence. The selection is complete, he said again, his tone brooking no argument. Miss Vance and I will retire. The betrothal will be announced formally tomorrow. He offered her his arm. Elara stared at it like it might be a trap. But what choice did she have now? She'd already jumped off the cliff, might as well see how far down it went. She placed her hand on his arm, and the world tilted. They walked through the crowd together. 500 people pressed back to let them pass, their faces a blur of shock, rage, disgust, and in some cases, dark amusement. This would be talked about for decades. The Duke who rejected 10 perfect brides to choose a nobody. The girl nobody wanted. Behind them, the dowager's voice rang out like a death sentence. This is not over, Ryland. Not by a long measure. But Ryland kept walking, and Elara kept pace beside him. And somehow they made it through the ballroom doors, into the hallway, past the servants who stared with their mouths open. The moment they rounded a corner into an empty corridor, Ryland dropped her arm like it was on fire. Listen carefully, he said, his voice still that same cold command, because I will only explain this once. Elara pressed her back against the wall, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. What just happened? I freed myself from a cage, and I gave you a choice. A choice? She almost laughed. Almost. You just, in front of everyone, made you the most powerful woman in the duchy, he finished. or the most vulnerable. That depends entirely on what you do next. I don't understand. He studied her, those ice-gray eyes seeming to catalog every weakness, every fear. You're intelligent. I saw you watching tonight, taking in everything while everyone else was too busy performing. You noticed things. She had. She always did. But nobody had ever noticed her noticing before. Why me? The question came out raw, stripped of any pretense. You could have chosen any woman in that ballroom, beautiful ones, powerful ones. Why would you choose someone like me? Because beauty is common, power is inherited. But truth? His expression shifted, just slightly, not quite a smile, more like the ghost of something human underneath all that ice. Truth is rare, and you didn't lie. I didn't say anything. Exactly. He turned toward the window, his profile sharp against the moonlight. Every woman in that ballroom was performing, playing a role, pretending to be whatever they thought I wanted. But you weren't trying to be anything at all. You were just there. Real. Elara's head was spinning. This is insane. Your grandmother is going to destroy me. Those ladies, their families. We'll try, Rylan agreed calmly. They'll attack you in every way they can imagine. Rumors, sabotage, social warfare that makes actual war look civilized. He turned back to face her, which is why you need to understand what this actually is. What do you mean? This isn't a love story, Miss Vance. This is a business arrangement. The words hit like cold water. Of course it was. I need to marry, Rylan continued, his tone matter-of-fact. My grandmother has been using my unmarried status as leverage to control me for years. Every decision I make, she threatens to withhold consent for marriage alliances, to block my military funding, to turn the court against me. The only way to break her power is to marry someone she can't control. So you chose someone with no power at all, Elara said slowly, understanding dawning. Someone she can't threaten or buy or manipulate through family connections. Smart. That almost smile flickered again. You see it. And what do I get out of this arrangement? The question came out sharper than she intended, but she was done being pushed around. Besides being torn apart by every noble in the realm, protection, wealth, a title, freedom to live however you choose as long as you maintain appearances in public. He counted off on his fingers like listing military supplies. I won't demand anything from you beyond basic courtesy. No. Marital expectations. This is purely strategic. No love, no romance, no messy emotions that could complicate things. Elara should have felt relieved. Instead, something in her chest twisted with an emotion she couldn't quite name. And if I say no, she asked, then you walk away. Tonight. I'll make sure you have enough money to start somewhere else, away from anyone who knows what happened here. You'll be free. Free. The word hung in the air between them like a promise and a lie. Because they both knew the truth. There was no walking away from this. The moment he'd spoken her name in that ballroom, her old life had ended. Going back to invisibility wasn't an option anymore. She could run to some distant town and hide, hoping the scandal would eventually fade. Or she could stand and fight. I have conditions, Elara heard herself say. Rylan's eyebrow, the one without the scar, rose slightly. Conditions. If I'm going to be your Duchess, even in name only, I won't be treated like property. I want respect. I want my voice heard, even if you don't take my advice. And I want, she swallowed hard, I want to matter, not just as a strategic piece on your chessboard, as a person. For a long moment he just looked at her. Then, slowly, deliberately, he held out his hand. Agreed. She took it. His palm was calloused, hard with years of sword work and war. But his grip, while firm, was careful, like he was very aware of his own strength. One more thing, she said, surprising herself with her own boldness. I need to know why you really did this, the truth. Not the strategic explanation. Rylan's expression shuddered. For a moment she thought he'd refuse to answer, then, because I'm tired of people who only show me what they think I want to see. Tired of masks and games and calculated performances. When I looked at you tonight, I saw someone who wasn't performing, someone who was just being, and I thought, he stopped, something raw flickering across his face before the ice returned. I thought that might be worth preserving. Before Elara could respond, voices echoed from down the hallway. Find them. The Duke cannot be allowed to finalize this madness. Ryland's hand went to the sword that wasn't at his hip, a soldier's instinct. We need to move. My rooms are in the East Wing. You'll stay there tonight. Tomorrow, we'll face this properly. Your rooms? Elara's eyes widened. Separate chambers, he clarified quickly, but under my protection. The moment my grandmother finds you alone, she'll make you disappear. Trust me on this. Trust. What a strange word to use with a man she'd met less than an hour ago. A man who'd just upended both their lives with a single impossible choice. But as the voices grew louder and Ryland's hand went to her elbow, guiding her swiftly through a maze of corridors she'd never seen before, Elara realized something startling. She did trust him. Maybe not completely, maybe not wisely, but enough to take the next step into the dark. They climbed a hidden servant's staircase, moved through passages that smelled of old stone and older secrets. Finally, Ryland pushed open a heavy oak door and pulled her into a suite of rooms that made her borrowed dress look even more pathetic by comparison. Dark wood, rich fabrics, weapons mounted on walls like artwork. This was a soldier's space trying to be a nobleman's quarters, and not quite succeeding at either. The bedroom is through there, Ryland said, gesturing to a door. Lock it if you want. I'll sleep out here. This is... Elara looked around, overwhelmed. This is your private space, which is now the safest place in the duchy for you. He moved to a sideboard and poured 2 glasses of something amber, handed her one. Drink, you're shaking. She was. She hadn't even noticed. The liquid burned going down, but it steadied her. Warmth spread through her chest, pushing back the cold fingers of shock. What happens tomorrow? She asked. War, Ryland said simply. My grandmother will try every tactic she knows to break this betrothal. The rejected families will come at you with everything they have. The court will treat you like an entertaining scandal at best, an abomination at worst. He took a drink from his own glass. It's going to be hell. Wonderful. Elara sank into a chair that probably cost more than she'd earned in her entire life. Any advice? Don't apologize. Don't explain. Don't let them see you break. His eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw something almost like respect there. You stood in front of 500 aristocrats tonight and didn't flinch. That's more spine than most soldiers I've commanded. I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Miss Vance. It's acting despite it. He set down his glass. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we face the wolves together. He started toward the door, clearly intending to sleep somewhere else, maybe his study, maybe the chair in the corner, giving her privacy. Space. Your Grace? He paused, hand on the doorframe. Thank you, Elara said quietly, for not making me go back to being invisible. Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth exactly, but maybe recognition. You were never invisible, Miss Vance. The world was just looking in the wrong direction. Then he was gone, and Elara was alone in a duke's chambers, wearing a borrowed dress, with a future she couldn't even begin to imagine stretching out ahead of her like uncharted territory. She moved to the window and looked out over the estate grounds, where carriages were already beginning to depart. The selection was over. The scandal was just beginning. Somewhere out there, the Dowager Duchess was planning her next move. Somewhere, 10 rejected ladies were sharpening their knives. Somewhere, an entire society was preparing to watch Elara Vance fail. She pressed her palm against the cold glass and made herself a promise. They could mock her. They could attack her. They could try to tear her down. But she would not disappear again. Not for anyone. The girl nobody chose was about to become someone nobody could ignore. And heaven help anyone who stood in her way. Dawn came too early, and with far too much noise. Elara jerked awake to the sound of voices outside the chamber doors. Sharp, angry voices that cut through the heavy oak like knives through paper. I don't care what protocols you're citing. I will see my grandson now. The Dowager. Elara scrambled out of the massive 4-poster bed, still wearing the gray dress from last night. She'd been too exhausted to even attempt removing it. Her reflection in the mirror looked like something dragged behind a carriage, hair tangled, dress wrinkled, eyes wide with the kind of panic that came from waking up in a stranger's bedroom while an enraged duchess pounded on the door. The bedroom door, her door, flew open. Ryland stood there, already dressed in riding clothes, his expression thunderous. "Stay here. Don't come out until I tell you it's safe." "Your Grace, I can't just hide while—" "You can and you will." His tone left no room for argument. "My grandmother plays for blood. You're not ready for her yet." Before Elara could protest, he was gone, pulling the door shut behind him with a finality that felt like a prison gate closing. She pressed her ear to the wood, shameless in her need to know what was coming. "Where is she?" The dowager's voice crackled with barely restrained fury. "Where is this companion you've decided to make a mockery of our family with?" "Good morning, grandmother." Ryland's tone was ice-cold courtesy. "How kind of you to visit at such an early hour." "Don't play games with me, boy. I raised you. I know every trick, every tactic. This rebellion ends now." "It's not a rebellion. It's a decision." "A decision?" The dowager laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You call destroying 400 years of Crow legacy a decision? You've made us the laughingstock of the realm. Every noble family from here to the Northern Territories is howling with either outrage or amusement." "Then let them howl." A crash. Something expensive hitting something solid. "I will not allow this. That girl is nothing. Nobody. A servant pretending to be—" "Careful, grandmother." Ryland's voice dropped to something dangerous. "She's my betrothed. Insult her again, and we'll have a very different conversation." Silence. Heavy and poisonous. When the dowager spoke again, her voice had changed, softer, more calculated. Elara recognized that tone. It was the same one Lady Margot used when she wanted to manipulate someone into thinking they'd made their own decision. "Ryland, my dear boy, I understand you're frustrated with the selection process, but this is not the answer. Think of what you're throwing away. Lady Cordelia's family controls half the shipping routes in the eastern seas. Lady Seraphina's coal empire could fund your military ambitions for decades. Even Lady Vivian, as your cousin, would have strengthened internal family bonds." "I don't need their money or their alliances. I need—" "What? Love?" The dowager spat the word like poison. "You think that girl in there loves you? She's a nobody who saw an opportunity and latched on like a parasite. She probably orchestrated this entire thing, positioned herself just right, played the invisible victim, waited for you to—" "She didn't even want this." Ryland cut her off. "When I chose her, she looked like I'd sentenced her to death, because she's intelligent enough to know exactly what you and your circle of vipers will do to her." "Then why do it? Why choose someone so completely unsuitable?" "Because she's real." Another silence. This one confused. "Real?" the dowager repeated. "What does that even mean?" "It means she doesn't want anything from me except to be treated like a human being. It means when she looks at me, she doesn't see a title or a fortune or a military reputation to exploit. She just sees—" He stopped abruptly. "It doesn't matter. The decision is made. Then unmake it." The dowager's voice turned sharp again. "Announce it was a mistake, a test of the court's loyalty. Say the girl seduced you with some peasant trick and you've come to your senses. I'll handle the rest, find her a position somewhere distant, give her enough money to keep quiet." "No." "Ryland, I said no." Each word fell like a hammer. "The betrothal stands. The wedding will proceed. And you, grandmother, will accept it, or you'll find yourself with significantly less influence over duchy affairs than you currently enjoy. You wouldn't dare strip me of my position. Try me." The tension was so thick Elara could feel it through the door. She held her breath, waiting for the explosion. Instead, the dowager laughed. Really laughed this time, though it sounded like breaking glass. "Oh, Ryland, you think you've outmaneuvered me. How precious." Her footsteps moved toward the door. Elara jerked back instinctively. "Fine. Keep your little companion. Dress her up, teach her which fork to use, parade her around like a trophy. But mark my words, she will fail. Publicly. Spectacularly. And when she does, when the weight of this world crushes her completely, You'll come crawling back and beg me to fix the disaster you've created. She's stronger than you think. We'll see. The outer door slammed hard enough to rattle the walls. Elara counted to 10, then 20, before the bedroom door opened again. Reland stood there, looking like he'd just fought a battle and wasn't sure if he'd won. You heard? All of it. Elara stepped out, trying to keep her voice steady. She's going to destroy me. She's going to try. He moved to the window, staring out at the grounds below. But she'll be subtle about it. Direct attacks would make her look petty. Instead, she'll let society do her work. Death by 1,000 cuts. Wonderful. Elara wrapped her arms around herself. So what do I do? You learn. Fast. He turned to face her. I've already sent for a lady's maid, a seamstress, and an etiquette instructor. You'll have 1 week before your formal introduction to court. 1 week to transform from companion to duchess-to-be. 1 week. 7 days to learn what those 10 rejected ladies had spent their entire lives perfecting. That's impossible. Probably. He said it so matter-of-factly that she almost laughed. But you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be competent enough that their attacks look like jealousy instead of justified criticism. A knock at the outer door interrupted them. That'll be your new staff, Ryland said. I'll leave you to them. I have military business that can't wait. He paused at the door. One more thing, don't trust anyone. Not the maids, not the instructors, not the friendly noble ladies who suddenly want to befriend you. Everyone in this palace is loyal to someone, and none of them are loyal to you yet. Comforting. That almost smile flickered. Welcome to aristocracy, Miss Vance. Then he was gone, and Elara was facing the door as it opened to reveal a small army of servants, all staring at her with varying degrees of curiosity, skepticism, and barely concealed disdain. A middle-aged woman in severe black stepped forward. Miss Vance, I'm Mrs. Aldridge, appointed as your head lady's maid. These are the staff assigned to your household. We have much work to do. Household? She had a household now. The concept was so absurd, Elara had to fight down hysterical laughter. Of course. Please, come in. The next hours were a whirlwind of humiliation disguised as help. The seamstress, a sharp-eyed woman named Madame Rousseau, took one look at Elara's borrowed dress and actually winced. Mon Dieu. We start from nothing, yes? She produced measuring tape and began circling Elara like a predator, making notes and occasional sounds of dismay. Meanwhile, Mrs. Aldridge directed 2 younger maids in drawing a bath. A massive copper tub filled with water that actually steamed, scattered with rose petals and oils that smelled like every luxury Elara had never been able to afford. In, Mrs. Aldridge commanded. Elara blinked. I'm sorry. The bath. You can't be presented to anyone looking like you've slept in your clothes. Her nose wrinkled slightly. Which you clearly have. There was no privacy. The maid simply waited, professional and impatient, until Elara reluctantly began undressing. She'd never had servants help her with anything, never had anyone see her like this, vulnerable, exposed, every inadequacy on display. One of the younger maids, a girl barely 16, gasped softly when she saw the small scar on Elara's shoulder, a burn from years ago when she'd been working in a kitchen and someone had knocked a pot onto her. Is something wrong? Elara asked quietly. No, miss. The girl caught Mrs. Aldridge's warning look and went silent. The bath was heaven and torture combined. The hot water soothed muscles she hadn't realized were tense, but the maid scrubbed her skin until it burned, washed her hair 3 times with increasingly expensive-smelling soaps, and critiqued every aspect of her appearance with the casual cruelty of people who did this every day. Her hands are rough, years of work. The hair will need deep conditioning, multiple treatments. Posture is terrible, shoulders hunched like a servant. Because she was a servant, Elara wanted to scream. Was a servant. Yesterday she'd been holding someone else's fan and fetching wine. Now these women were discussing her like a renovation project. But she bit her tongue and endured. After the bath came the seamstress. Madame Rousseau had brought fabric samples, silk, velvet, brocade, in colors Elara had only ever seen on other people. Rich blues, deep greens, burgundy that looked like wine. No pastels, Madame Rousseau declared. With her coloring, pastels will make her disappear. We want presence, authority. She must command attention the moment she enters a room. I thought I was supposed to be invisible, Elara muttered. You were a companion. Now you're a duke's betrothed. Mrs. Aldridge's expression was unreadable. Invisibility is no longer an option. They dressed her in a temporary gown while measurements were finalized, a deep emerald that somehow made her brown hair look richer, her eyes brighter. It fit poorly, clearly made for someone else, but it was still the finest thing she'd ever worn. Then came the etiquette instructor. Lord Pemberton was 70 if he was a day, rail thin, with a voice that could cut glass and eyes that missed nothing. He took one look at Elara and sighed deeply. They warned me it would be a challenge. I didn't realize it would be quite this severe. I can learn, Elara said, lifting her chin. Can you? He circled her slowly. Walk to that chair and sit. She did, or tried to. Apparently she did it completely wrong. No, no, no! Lord Pemberton actually shuddered. You walked like a servant hurrying to avoid punishment. A duchess glides. She takes her time because time bends to her will, not the reverse. And that, he gestured at how she'd sat. That was collapse, not sitting. Back straight, knees together, hands folded. You're not resting, you're presenting. They practiced for an hour, just walking and sitting. By the end, Elara's back ached and her jaw hurt from keeping her expression pleasant while Lord Pemberton critiqued every breath. Better? He finally conceded. Barely. Now, forms of address. When greeting a duke, I know forms of address, Elara interrupted. I've been watching nobles for years. Watching and performing are entirely different skills, child. Recite them. She did, perfectly. Every title, every proper greeting, every subtle variation based on rank and familiarity. Lord Pemberton's eyebrows rose slightly. Well, perhaps this won't be completely hopeless after all. The day blurred into lessons, how to hold a wine glass, how to use 17 different pieces of silverware, how to enter a room, how to curtsy. There were apparently 14 different types depending on who you were greeting, how to make conversation without actually saying anything of substance, how to smile while someone insulted you to your face. That last one felt particularly relevant. You'll face verbal attacks constantly, Lord Pemberton explained. Backhanded compliments, innocent questions that are actually accusations. You must never lose composure, never respond with anger or defensiveness. Instead, you smile, thank them gracefully, and redirect. Can I also tell them to? No. His tone was final. The nobility are sharks. They feed on emotional reactions. Give them nothing. By evening, Elara was exhausted in ways she'd never experienced. Her feet hurt from walking practice. Her face hurt from smile practice. Her entire body hurt from maintaining perfect posture for hours. Mrs. Aldridge appeared with a dinner tray. You'll eat in your chambers tonight. Tomorrow, you'll dine with His Grace. He wants to see your progress. Progress. She'd gone from invisible servant to performing seal in under 24 hours. The food was incredible. Delicate fish and sauce, vegetables she didn't recognize, bread that practically melted. But Elara barely tasted it. She was too busy thinking about what came next. Tomorrow she'd face Rylan across a dinner table and be judged on whether she could use the right fork. Next week, she'd face the entire court and be judged on whether she deserved to breathe the same air as them. She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear the knock until Mrs. Aldridge answered it. You have a visitor, miss. Elara's stomach dropped. Who? But she already knew. The dowager had promised subtle attacks. Apparently subtle meant less than a day. The woman who swept into the room was younger than the dowager, but carried the same air of absolute authority. Blonde, beautiful, dressed in pale blue silk that probably cost more than Elara would earn in 5 years. Lady Cordelia Thornberry, the shipping empire heiress, the woman who should have been duchess. Miss Vance. Cordelia's smile was perfect, warm, completely fake. I hope I'm not intruding. Of course not, Lady Thornberry. Please, sit. Elara gestured to the chairs by the fireplace, praying she was doing it correctly. Cordelia settled gracefully. that gliding movement Lord Pemberton had been trying to beat into Elara all day. I wanted to welcome you personally. What happened at the selection was unexpected, but I believe in moving forward with grace, don't you? Every word was a blade wrapped in silk. That's very kind of you, Elara said carefully, maintaining that pleasant smile Lord Pemberton had drilled into her. I thought perhaps we could be friends. You must be feeling quite overwhelmed, thrust into this world with no preparation, no family to guide you. Cordelia's blue eyes were sharp despite the sympathetic tone. I could help. Introduce you to the right people, teach you the unwritten rules, ensure you don't make any unfortunate mistakes. There it was, the offer that sounded like kindness but was really a leash. I appreciate the offer, Elara said slowly, but I wouldn't want to impose on your time. Oh, it's no imposition at all. Cordelia leaned forward slightly, and her voice dropped to something almost conspiratorial. Between us, many people are wondering about your suitability. I could help smooth those concerns. Make sure you're accepted rather than rejected. And what would you want in return? The mask slipped just slightly. Cordelia's smile turned sharper. Only your friendship, of course, and perhaps a small acknowledgement of my position. I am, after all, one of the most influential women at court. Having me as an ally would be invaluable. Translation: publicly defer to me. Make it clear I'm still more important than you. Let me control you, and I'll tell the other sharks not to feed. Elara thought of Ryland's warning. Don't trust anyone. Lady Thornberry, I'm grateful for your concern, truly, but I think I should find my own path, make my own mistakes, and earn acceptance, or not, on my own merits. She kept her tone gentle, but the refusal was clear. Cordelia's expression went cold. How brave, and how foolish. She stood, that perfect posture never wavering. I came here offering help because I thought you might have enough intelligence to recognize your position. Clearly, I was wrong. Clearly. You'll regret this. When the court tears you apart, and they will, don't come crying to me for rescue. Cordelia moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. That dress you're wearing? It was mine. I donated it to the servants' charity last year because it was out of fashion. Just thought you should know. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Elara looked down at the emerald dress, feeling the insult like a physical blow. Even her temporary clothing was someone else's cast-off, someone else's rejected thing. Mrs. Aldridge appeared from the adjacent room where she'd been pretending not to listen. That was well handled, miss. Was it? I just made an enemy of one of the most powerful women at court. You were already her enemy the moment His Grace chose you. Mrs. Aldridge began clearing the dinner tray. At least this way, you didn't sell yourself for false promises. Elara sank into the chair Cordelia had just vacated. Does it get easier, navigating all this? No. The answer was blunt. But you get better at it, or you break. She paused at the door. For what it's worth, miss, I've served in this palace for 30 years. I've seen dozens of noble ladies come and go. Most of them were exactly what they appeared to be, but you, she hesitated. You might actually be something different. Different how? Real. Like His Grace said. After Mrs. Aldridge left, Elara sat alone in the dimly lit chamber, exhaustion pulling at her bones. Tomorrow would bring more lessons, more judgment, more tests she wasn't prepared for. But tonight, she'd survived her first full day as Ryland Crow's betrothed. She'd bathed in luxury while servants critiqued her body. She'd learned to walk like she owned the world. She'd faced a rejected rival and refused to bow. Small victories, tiny steps forward, but still forward. She was still moving forward. The week that followed was a brutal education in survival. Lord Pemberton drilled her relentlessly on etiquette, conversation, and the intricate dance of court politics. Madame Rousseau created a wardrobe of gowns designed to make Elara look like she belonged, even if she didn't feel it. Mrs. Aldridge managed the household staff with an iron fist, protecting Elara from the worst of the palace gossip, while making sure she heard enough to know what she was up against. And every evening, she dined with Ryland. The first dinner was stiff, formal, both of them performing for the servants who watched from the corners. He asked about her lessons. She gave careful answers. They discussed weather, upcoming court events, nothing of substance. The second dinner was slightly better. He mentioned a military campaign he was planning. She asked intelligent questions. He looked surprised, then answered seriously, treating her like someone capable of understanding strategy. The third dinner, something shifted. "You refused Lady Cordelia's friendship," Ryland said suddenly, cutting into his venison with surgical precision. Elara's hand froze halfway to her wine glass. "How did you—" "I have informants everywhere. Did you think that conversation was private?" She should have known, should have assumed every word she spoke was being reported back to someone. "She wanted me under her control," Elara said carefully. I declined. "That was dangerous. She's vindictive when rejected. So is your grandmother, apparently. Might as well collect powerful enemies efficiently." Reland's fork paused. Then he did something unexpected. He laughed. Actually laughed. A short, genuine sound that transformed his entire face from ice to something almost human. "Fair point." He studied her across the table. "You're adapting faster than I expected. Lord Pemberton says I'm a disaster waiting to happen. Lord Pemberton said the same thing about me when I was 12. I turned out fine." "You're a war hero with a reputation for being emotionally unavailable and terrifying." "Exactly. Fine." But he was almost smiling. These moments, these tiny cracks in his armor, were becoming Elara's favorite part of the day. The rest was performance and survival. But here, across the dinner table with wine and honesty, something real happened, something neither of them had planned for. On the seventh day, everything changed. Elara woke to Mrs. Aldridge standing over her bed, face pale. "What's wrong?" "Your formal introduction to court has been moved up. It's today." "What? No, I have 3 more days." The Dowager pushed for an emergency session. She's calling it a matter of duchy security, verifying your background before the betrothal can proceed. Mrs. Aldridge was already pulling dresses from the wardrobe. "It's a trap, miss. She's forcing you into court before you're ready, hoping you'll fail publicly." Elara's heart hammered. "Can she do that?" "She just did. You're to appear before the full court at noon. That gives us 4 hours. 4 hours to prepare for a trial disguised as an introduction." The next hours were chaos. Madame Rousseau arrived with a dress that wasn't quite finished, deep burgundy with gold embroidery, formal enough for court but still being stitched. Lord Pemberton appeared to drill Elara on proper responses to hostile questions. Mrs. Aldridge managed 6 different crises while maintaining an expression of iron calm. And Ryland appeared in the doorway looking like thunder incarnate. "I'm going to kill her." "Your grandmother?" Elara asked, trying to hold still while Madame Rousseau pinned the dress. "She's violated every protocol to make this happen. It's supposed to be a courtesy introduction. Instead, she's turned it into an inquisition." He paced like a caged wolf. "I can delay it. Force a postponement." "No." Everyone stopped. Elara met Ryland's eyes in the mirror. "If you delay it, she'll just do this again. Keep pushing, keep controlling. Better to face it now and get it over with." "You're not ready." "I'll never be ready. Not for this." She turned to face him directly. "But I can survive it. I've survived worse." "Have you?" His expression was fierce. "Have you survived 500 aristocrats looking for any excuse to tear you apart? Have you survived professional court manipulators who've been playing these games since before you were born?" "No, but I've survived being invisible, being nothing, being treated like I didn't matter." Her voice stayed steady. This is just a different kind of war. And you said it yourself, courage is acting despite fear." Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or concern. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." She straightened, feeling the weight of the burgundy dress settle around her shoulders like armor. "Because if I run now, I'll always be running. And I'm done running." At precisely noon, the doors to the great hall opened. Elara stepped through alone. The hall was massive, 3 times the size of the ballroom from the selection. 500 nobles filled it, all standing, all staring. The Dowager sat on a raised platform at the far end, looking like a judge preparing to deliver a death sentence. Ryland was there too, standing to the side, his expression carefully neutral. but his hands were clenched so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Lord Pemberton's voice echoed in her head. Back straight, head high. Glide. Don't walk. You own the room, even when you don't. Elara walked forward, every step measured, every breath controlled. The nobles watched like predators watching wounded prey. She could feel their judgment, their disgust, their anticipation of her failure. She reached the platform and curtsied, the deep formal curtsy reserved for royalty. Not because the dowager deserved it, but because Lord Pemberton had taught her that excessive courtesy could be its own form of warfare. "Your Grace," she said clearly, "thank you for this audience." The dowager's smile was ice. "Miss Vance, how kind of you to join us. I trust you understand why we've gathered." "To formally introduce me to court, I believe." "To verify you're suitable for introduction to court." The correction was sharp. "Tell me, Miss Vance, what is your family background?" Here it was, the first attack. "My father was a merchant, Your Grace. He died when I was 10. My mother worked as a seamstress until her death 3 years ago." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Merchant, seamstress, common professions, common blood. "No title whatsoever?" the dowager pressed. "None, Your Grace." "No land? No fortune? No connections to any established family?" "None, Your Grace." Elara kept her voice calm, factual. She wasn't apologizing, just stating truth. "And yet my grandson has chosen you to be Duchess of Ashmont, one of the most powerful positions in the realm." The dowager leaned forward. "Why do you think that is?" The question was a trap. Any answer would sound either arrogant or manipulative. Elara met the dowager's eyes directly. "I don't presume to know His Grace's mind, Your Grace. You would have to ask him." "I'm asking you." "Then I honestly don't know. I'm as surprised as anyone." A different voice cut through the hall. Lady Cordelia, stepping forward from the crowd. Perhaps Miss Vance used other methods to secure her position, methods more common to her background. The implication was clear and vicious. The crowd's murmurs turned uglier. Elara's face burned, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Don't react. Don't give them emotion. I assure you, Lady Thornberry, I did nothing to pursue or manipulate His Grace's decision." "Forgive me for finding that difficult to believe," Cordelia continued, her voice dripping false concern. "After all, for a servant to suddenly become a duchess? That only happens in fairy tales, or through very calculated schemes." Before Elara could respond, Ryland's voice cut across the hall like a blade. "Careful, Lady Thornberry. You're coming dangerously close to accusing both Miss Vance of deception and me of being too stupid to notice." Cordelia paled slightly, but held her ground. "I would never suggest such a thing, Your Grace. I merely question, then stop questioning." Ryland moved to stand beside Elara, a wall of controlled fury. Miss Vance answered truthfully. She had no title, no fortune, no schemes. "I chose her because she was the only honest person in that entire ballroom. The only one not performing, not manipulating, not pretending to be something she wasn't." His gaze swept the crowd. "Which is more than I can say for most people in this room." The dowager rose slowly from her seat. "Ryland, this proceeding is about verification, not your personal feelings." "Then verify." His tone was challenging. "Ask your questions. Run your investigations. But do it quickly, because this charade is beneath the dignity of the duchy." "Very well." The dowager's expression was deadly calm. "Miss Vance, can you name the 7 major noble houses and their primary holdings?" Elara could. Lord Pemberton had drilled her mercilessly. She recited them perfectly. "Recite the proper forms of address for each rank from baron to duke." She did. "Explain the protocol for a formal state dinner." She did, not missing a single detail. Question after question, the dowager tried to trip her up. But Lord Pemberton had been thorough, and Elara had always been a quick study. She answered each one correctly, her voice never wavering. Finally, the dowager played her last card. "One final question. Why should we, the nobility, the established families, the guardians of tradition, accept you as one of us? What could you possibly bring to this position besides my grandson's inexplicable fascination?" The hall went silent. This was the real test. Not facts, not protocol, justification for her existence. Elara took a slow breath. She thought of every year in the shadows, every insult swallowed, every noble who'd looked through her like she was glass. And she decided to tell them the truth. Nothing, she said clearly. I bring nothing but myself. I have no fortune to strengthen the duchy, no political connections to leverage, no ancient bloodline to add prestige. All I can offer is my honesty, my willingness to learn, and my commitment to this position, not because I sought it, but because it was given to me, and I won't dishonor that choice by running away when things get difficult. She paused, meeting the dowager's eyes. You ask why you should accept me? You shouldn't. Not yet. I haven't earned your acceptance, but I will. Not by pretending to be something I'm not, but by proving I can be worthy of the title I've been given. And if that's not good enough for this court, she straightened, feeling something fierce and unbreakable rising in her chest. Then I'm not sure I want the acceptance of people who judge worth only by bloodlines and bank accounts. The silence that followed was absolute. The dowager stared at her like she'd grown a second head. Cordelia looked ready to faint from shock. And Rylan was smiling. Actually smiling, not that almost smile. A real expression of something that looked dangerously close to pride. Well, the dowager said finally, her voice tight, that was certainly honest. You did ask, Your Grace. For a long moment, the dowager said nothing. Then she turned to address the crowd. The verification is complete. Miss Elara Vance is deemed suitable for introduction to court. The betrothal will proceed as announced. She said it like signing a death warrant, but she said it. The crowd erupted in whispers, shock, outrage, and in a few corners, very few, what might have been grudging respect. Elara had survived her first trial, but as she left the great hall with Rylan at her side, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The dowager had been forced to accept her publicly, which meant the private warfare was about to get much, much worse. The warfare started 3 days later. Elara woke to find every servant except Mrs. Aldridge had resigned overnight. No explanation, no warning, just empty corridors where bustling staff should have been. The dowager's work, Mrs. Aldridge said grimly, bringing breakfast herself, a task far beneath her station. She's making it clear what happens to anyone who serves you. Can she do that? She controls most of the palace staff's employment contracts. Those who stayed with you would find themselves unemployable anywhere else in the duchy. Mrs. Aldridge set down the tray with more force than necessary. It's a message, to you and to anyone else who might consider supporting you. Elara pushed the food around her plate, appetite gone. What do I do? What you've been doing. Survive. But survival was getting harder. The invitations that should have arrived, tea parties, luncheons, the casual social gatherings that form the backbone of noble life, never came. Elara was excluded from everything, invisible again, but in a different way. Before, no one had seen her. Now, everyone saw her and deliberately looked away. When she walked through the palace corridors, conversations stopped. Nobles turned their backs. One duchess actually stepped aside as if Elara carried some contagious disease. Don't they have anything better to do than shun me? Elara muttered after the third such encounter in one morning. You're the entertainment, Mrs. Aldridge replied. The scandal that keeps giving. They're waiting to see how long you last before you crack. How encouraging. The only bright spots were her evening dinners with Rylan. He'd been absent for 2 days handling military matters in the northern territories, and his return brought a strange sense of relief Elara wasn't ready to examine too closely. You look exhausted, he said bluntly when he walked into the dining room that night. Thank you. Every woman loves to hear that. I didn't mean... He stopped, something almost like embarrassment crossing his face. I'm not good at this. Social niceties. I've noticed. But she smiled despite herself. His awkwardness was oddly comforting. At least he wasn't performing. They ate in comfortable silence for a while before Rylan spoke again. My grandmother has been busy. I'm aware. No staff, no invitations, no allies. She's isolating me. It's worse than that. He set down his fork, his expression dark. She's spreading rumors, claiming you're using some kind of influence over me, suggestions that you're not what you appear to be. Elara's stomach twisted. What kind of suggestions? The kind that question your character, your morals, your background. His jaw tightened. It's vile, and it's working. The court is eating it up like candy. Can we fight it? Prove the rumors false? How do you prove a negative? She's not making specific accusations we can refute, just planting seeds of doubt. He looked at her directly. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Are you sure you want to continue? The question hung between them like a sword. Are you asking me to leave? I'm asking if you want to. This arrangement, it was supposed to give you freedom, not trap you in a different kind of prison. Elara studied him across the table. His expression was carefully neutral, but something in his eyes suggested the question mattered more than he was admitting. Do you want me to leave? No. The answer came quickly, almost involuntarily. Then quieter. No, I don't. Then I'm staying. Something shifted in the air between them, not the strategic alliance they'd agreed to. Something warmer, more dangerous. Rylan cleared his throat. There's a ball in 5 days, the Harvest Festival. It's the largest social event of the season. You'll need to attend. Will your grandmother be there? Everyone will be there, which means it's the perfect opportunity for her to make her next move. He paused. I'll be with you the entire time. You can't protect me from whispers and social warfare. No, but I can make it clear that attacking you means attacking me. His tone turned steel hard, and I'm significantly harder to destroy. The confidence should have been arrogant. Instead, it was just fact. The days before the ball crawled by with agonizing slowness. Madame Rousseau created a gown specifically designed to make a statement, midnight blue with silver embroidery that caught light like stars. Lord Pemberton drilled Elara on every possible social scenario she might face. If Lady Cordelia approaches with false friendship, smile graciously, keep responses brief, don't commit to anything. If someone questions your background directly, acknowledge it honestly without apologizing. Own the truth before they can weaponize it. If the Dowager herself attacks, maintain courtesy at all costs. She wants me to lose composure publicly. I won't give her that satisfaction. Good. Lord Pemberton actually looked pleased. You're learning. But on the afternoon before the ball, everything changed. Mrs. Aldridge burst into Elara's chambers, her face ashen. What's wrong? Your mother. Mrs. Aldridge's hands were shaking. Someone's been investigating her, digging into her past. Cold dread flooded Elara's veins. Why? My mother was a seamstress. There's nothing to find. There's always something to find if you dig deep enough and twist it correctly. Mrs. Aldridge handed over a document. This arrived at the palace an hour ago. Anonymous, but we both know who sent it. Elara unfolded the paper with trembling hands. The words swam before her eyes. Allegations, accusations, claims that her mother had worked in establishments of ill repute before becoming a seamstress, that Elara herself might be illegitimate, that her entire background was built on lies and shame. None of it was true. Her mother had been a respectable woman who worked herself to death trying to provide for her daughter, but truth didn't matter when the lies were this perfectly crafted. This will be released at the ball, Elara whispered. She'll wait until the perfect moment, in front of everyone, and destroy me with this. We don't know that. Yes, we do. Elara crumpled the paper in her fist. This is her endgame. She tried isolation. She tried rumors. Now she's going to publicly annihilate my character and my mother's memory in one move. Mrs. Aldridge's expression was fierce. Then we fight back. We find proof that it's false. How? My mother's been dead for 3 years. Any records that might exist are scattered across half the duchy. We'd need weeks to gather evidence, and we have hours. Elara sank into a chair, the weight of it crushing her. She's won. Even if Rylan stands by me after this, which he won't, not when it makes him look like a fool, I'll be destroyed, and my mother's name will be dragged through filth. Miss Vance, leave me, please. Her voice cracked. I need to think. After Mrs. Aldridge left, Elara sat in the growing darkness, the crumpled accusations in her hand. She could run, take what money she had, leave tonight, disappear into some distant town where no one knew her name or her shame. Or she could stay and watch her mother's memory be shredded in front of the entire aristocracy. The choice should have been obvious, but when Rylan appeared in her doorway an hour later, she still hadn't moved. Mrs. Aldridge told me. He crossed the room, taking the chair across from her. Let me see it. She handed him the document silently. He read it, his expression growing darker with each line. When he finished, he very deliberately tore it in half. It's lies. I know that. You know that. But will anyone else believe it? Elara's voice was hollow. Or will they believe what they want to believe? That the servant girl who somehow trapped a duke came from exactly the kind of background they always suspected? I'll stand with you, publicly refute every word. That'll make you look either foolish or complicit. She met his eyes. Your grandmother planned this perfectly. Either you abandon me and prove I was never worthy, or you defend me and damage your own reputation. I don't care about my reputation. You should. You're a duke, a military commander. Your reputation is your power. Rylan leaned forward, his voice intense. My reputation was built on battlefields, not ballrooms. I faced armies that wanted me dead. I think I can handle court gossip. This isn't gossip. This is character assassination. Elara stood, pacing to the window. If we go to that ball tomorrow, your grandmother will release this. Everyone will see it, judge it. And even if we prove it false eventually, the damage will be done. People will always wonder, always whisper. Then we don't go. That's the same as admitting defeat. Or it's strategic retreat. He rose, moving to stand beside her. We stay away, gather evidence, prove the accusations false before facing the court. We don't have time for that. And even if we did, her voice broke. My mother was a good woman. She worked herself to exhaustion to keep us fed and housed. She died with her hands ruined from sewing, her back bent from years of labor. And now they're going to turn her into something shameful, something dirty. Even if we prove it's lies, people will remember the accusations more than the refutation. Silence stretched between them. There's a third option, Rylan said quietly. What? We go to the ball. And when my grandmother makes her move, you do something completely unexpected. Elara turned to look at him. Like what? You own it. Own false accusations? Own your truth so completely that her lies can't touch it. His eyes were fierce. Don't defend. Don't deny. Don't give her the satisfaction of seeing you scramble. Instead, stand up in front of everyone and tell them exactly who your mother was, who you are. Make them see the real person instead of the rumor. That's insane. Probably. He almost smiled. But so was choosing you in the first place, and that's worked out better than I expected. Something warm flickered in Elara's chest despite the fear. Has it? You're still here, aren't you? Still fighting? His expression softened slightly. I've seen soldiers break under less pressure than what you've endured. But you keep standing back up. I'm terrified. Good. That means you're smart enough to understand the stakes. He held out his hand. But you're also brave enough to face them anyway. So the question is, are you going to let my grandmother win? Or are you going to show her and everyone else that Elara Vance doesn't break? She looked at his extended hand, at the man who'd chosen her for reasons she still didn't fully understand, at the impossible situation they'd created together, and she made her choice. I'm going to the ball. Together? She placed her hand in his. Together. The Harvest Festival ball was even more extravagant than the selection. Golden decorations dripped from every surface. Tables overflowed with food and wine. The orchestra was twice the size, and the crowd, easily 600 nobles, all dressed in their finest, all watching the doorway with predatory anticipation. They were waiting for her, waiting to see the companion girl who dared rise above her station, waiting for her inevitable destruction. Elara stood at the entrance in her midnight blue gown, Rylan at her side in formal military dress, and felt the weight of hundreds of eyes fix on her like weapons. Ready? Rylan's voice was low, meant only for her. No, let's go anyway. They entered together. The crowd didn't part this time. They pressed in, a wall of silk and judgment, forcing Elara and Rylan to move through them like navigating enemy territory. Is that really her? The audacity, showing her face. I heard the most interesting things about her background. Whispers followed them like smoke. Elara kept her head high, her expression pleasant, her hand steady on Ryland's arm. Don't react. Don't give them anything. Lady Cordelia appeared in their path, resplendent in gold silk. Miss Vance, how brave of you to attend. I wasn't sure you would, given everything. Why wouldn't I attend? Elara kept her tone light. It's such a lovely event. Of course, though some people might feel uncomfortable attending when their presence causes such discussion. Cordelia's smile was poison sweet. But I suppose you're used to being talked about by now. I am. It's remarkable how much time people have to discuss others when their own lives are so empty. Cordelia's eyes flashed. Before she could respond, the dowager's voice cut through the ballroom like a blade. Attention, everyone, if I might have a moment. The crowd went silent. This was it. The dowager stood on the central platform, magnificent in deep purple, holding a document that Elara recognized instantly. Her stomach turned to ice. Tonight is a celebration of our duchy's prosperity and tradition, the dowager began, her voice carrying to every corner. But it's also a time for truth. And I'm afraid I must share some difficult information that has come to light regarding Miss Elara Vance. Ryland's hand covered Elara's where it rested on his arm. A silent gesture of support. An investigation into Miss Vance's background has revealed some troubling facts about her mother's past. Stop. The voice wasn't Ryland's. It was Elara's. She stepped forward, away from Ryland's protective presence, into the center of the room. Every eye swiveled to her. Your Grace, she said clearly, looking directly at the dowager. I'll save you the trouble of reading whatever fabrications are on that document. The dowager's expression flickered with surprise. Fabrications? Lies about my mother designed to humiliate me and damage Duke Crow's reputation. Elara's voice didn't shake. But since you've brought up my background publicly, allow me to address it myself. The crowd pressed closer, hungry for the spectacle. Elara took a deep breath and spoke the truth. My mother's name was Margaret Vance. She was a seamstress who worked 14-hour days to keep us fed after my father died. She taught me to read using whatever scraps of paper she could find. She never owned anything fine or valuable. Never attended a ball like this. Never wore silk or drank champagne or lived in anything larger than a 2-room apartment that smelled of fabric dye and lamp oil. She turned slowly, making eye contact with the crowd. She had rough hands from years of needlework, a bent back from hunching over her sewing, and when she died 3 years ago, she was buried in a pauper's grave because I couldn't afford anything better. That's my background. That's where I come from. And if that makes me unsuitable for this court, her voice strengthened. Then I question what this court actually values. Dead silence. My mother was honest, hardworking, kind to people who had less than we did, which was nearly impossible because we had almost nothing. She never lied, never cheated, never hurt anyone to get ahead. And whatever lies are on that paper. She gestured to the document in the dowager's hand. They can't change who she actually was. A good woman who deserved better than to have her memory destroyed by people who never knew her and never cared to. The dowager's face had gone pale. This wasn't the script. Elara was supposed to deny, to defend, to scramble. Not to stand there and make the entire court face uncomfortable truths. You speak very boldly for someone with no proof. I have proof. Another voice, a female, elderly, coming from the back of the crowd. The nobles parted to reveal a small, white-haired woman in simple but clean dress. She walked forward with the aid of a cane, her expression fierce. Elara's heart stopped. Mrs. Brennan? Hello, child. The old woman smiled. You didn't think I'd miss this, did I? Mrs. Brennan had been the landlady of the building where Elara and her mother had lived, the closest thing to family either of them had known. I don't understand, Elara began. Mrs. Aldridge found me, Mrs. Brennan explained, still moving forward. Sent a messenger 3 days ago asking about Margaret Vance. I brought everything I had. She pulled documents from a worn satchel. Rental agreements showing Margaret Vance lived and worked as a seamstress for 15 years. Letters from customers praising her work. Testimony from neighbors who knew her character. She fixed the dowager with a look that could have melted stone. Margaret Vance was one of the finest women I ever met. Raised this girl alone after her husband died. Never complained, never asked for charity she hadn't earned, and I won't stand here and let anyone sully her name with lies. The dowager's composure was fracturing. These documents prove nothing. They prove more than whatever garbage is on that paper you're holding, Mrs. Brennan shot back. Now, are you going to read it? Go ahead. Let's compare my proof against your poison. The crowd was riveted. This wasn't noble warfare. This was raw, real confrontation between truth and lies. The dowager looked at the document in her hand, looked at Mrs. Brennan's fierce expression, looked at Elara standing in the center of the ballroom, no longer invisible, no longer silent, and she made a decision. This information requires further verification before being released publicly. I withdraw my statement pending additional investigation. It was the closest thing to surrender the Dowager Duchess had probably ever given, but Elara wasn't done. No. Everyone froze. No, the Dowager repeated, her voice dangerous. I want you to read it, right now, in front of everyone. Elara's tone was absolute. Because I'm done with whispers and insinuations. Read your accusations out loud, Your Grace. Let everyone hear exactly what you were willing to destroy me with, and then let them decide who lacks character, the seamstress's daughter who told the truth, or the Duchess who weaponized lies. The ballroom held its breath. The Dowager's hands trembled slightly as she looked at the document. For the first time since Elara had met her, the woman looked uncertain. This is unnecessary. Read it. Ryland's voice cut across the room like steel. He'd moved to stand beside Elara, his expression carved from ice. You wanted to make this public, grandmother. So make it public. Let's hear what you were willing to say about a dead woman to maintain your control. The Dowager looked between them, her grandson and the girl she'd tried to destroy, and realized she'd lost. If she read the accusation, she'd look vicious. If she refused, she'd look weak. There was no winning move. This gathering is concluded, she said abruptly, crumpling the document in her fist. Everyone leave. Now. But no one moved. Because something had shifted in the ballroom. The crowd that had come to watch Elara's destruction was now watching the Dowagers instead. Lady Cordelia was the first to move. She crossed to Elara slowly, her expression complicated. That was unexpected. She hesitated, then added quietly, Your mother sounds like she was remarkable. She was. Cordelia nodded and walked away, but something in her posture had changed. Not friendship, but maybe respect. Others followed. Not everyone, not even most, but enough nobles approached to offer brief words, acknowledgement, if not acceptance, that the balance of power had shifted. Elara had faced the Dowager's attack and survived. More than survived. She turned it into a moment of truth that made the entire court uncomfortable with their own cruelty. By the time the ballroom finally emptied, Elara was exhausted beyond measure. Mrs. Brennan had been escorted to comfortable quarters. Mrs. Aldridge was handling the aftermath, and Elara stood alone with Rylan in the nearly empty hall. Your grandmother is going to hate me even more now, she said quietly. Probably. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. But everyone else saw something tonight. What? Strength. Real strength. Not the performance of it. He moved closer. You stood in front of the entire court and made them face uncomfortable truths about themselves. That takes more courage than any battle I've fought. I was terrified the entire time. I know. His voice was softer now. But you did it anyway. They stood there in the dimming ballroom, surrounded by the remnants of gold decorations and half-empty wine glasses, and something passed between them that had nothing to do with strategic arrangements or political alliances. Rylan, she began. The explosion cut her off. The sound was deafening, a massive blast from somewhere in the palace that shook the walls and sent crystal chandeliers swaying dangerously. Screams erupted from the corridors outside. Rylan's soldier instincts kicked in instantly. Stay here. Like hell. But he was already running toward the sound, and Elara ran after him because she'd learned that safety was an illusion, and hiding solved nothing. They burst into the corridor to find smoke billowing from the east wing. Nobles were fleeing in panic, servants shouting for water, guards rushing toward the flames. "The east wing," Ryland said, his face going pale. "That's the Duchess' quarters," Elara finished, "where Mrs. Brennan had been taken, where all the evidence about her mother's true background was stored." They ran through smoke and chaos, Ryland shouting orders to guards, Elara's heart hammering with sick certainty. This wasn't an accident. This was the Dowager's real move. When they reached the Duchess' quarters, the door was blown outward, smoke pouring from the rooms beyond. Guards were already fighting the flames, but the heat was intense. "Mrs. Brennan!" Elara screamed, trying to push past Ryland into the inferno. He caught her around the waist. "You can't. She's in there." "I'm here, child." The voice came from behind them. Elara spun to find Mrs. Brennan standing in the corridor, soot-stained but alive, supported by Mrs. Aldridge. "Someone pulled me out just before the blast," Mrs. Brennan said, coughing. "A servant I didn't recognize. Told me to run and disappeared." "The documents?" Elara asked desperately. Mrs. Brennan's expression said everything. Gone. All the proof of her mother's real life. All the evidence that could refute the Dowager's lies. Destroyed in one carefully planned explosion. Ryland was already interrogating guards, his voice sharp with command. "Who had access to this wing? Who authorized any work or deliveries today?" But Elara already knew the answer. The Dowager had tried public destruction and failed, so she'd switched to literal destruction instead. "This was a warning," Mrs. Aldridge said quietly, reading Elara's expression. "Next time, it won't be documents that burn." The flames were being controlled now, but the damage was done. The Duchess' quarters were gutted. The evidence was ash. And somewhere in the palace, the Dowager was making her next move. Elara stood in the smoke-filled corridor covered in soot, watching everything she'd fought for burn, and realized something terrible and clarifying. This was no longer about social warfare or court politics. This was life and death. And the Dowager had just declared she was willing to kill to maintain control. Ryland turned to her, his expression fierce and frightened in equal measure. "We're leaving. Tonight. I'm taking you somewhere safe." "No." "Elara, she just tried to—" "I know what she tried to do." Elara's voice was steady despite the fear screaming through her veins. "And if I run now, she wins completely. She destroys my reputation, eliminates any evidence to the contrary, and makes sure I can never come back. Better alive and exiled than dead and vindicated." "Is it?" She met his eyes. "Because I've been invisible my whole life, Ryland. I've hidden and stayed silent and let people like your grandmother decide my worth. And tonight, for the first time, I stood up and made them see me. Really see me. I'm not going back to being nothing. This isn't about being nothing. This is about survival. This is about both." She grabbed his hands, desperate for him to understand. "If I leave, your grandmother will spin this however she wants. The explosion will be my fault somehow, and you'll be trapped dealing with the aftermath while I'm hiding in some distant town, always wondering if she'll find me anyway. So what do you propose?" Elara looked at the smoking ruins of the Duchess' quarters. At Mrs. Brennan being tended by servants. At the guards securing the area. At the power and resources that came with being a duke's betrothed. Resources she'd barely begun to understand how to use. We fight back. Not with social warfare. With truth. We find out exactly what your grandmother is hiding that makes her this desperate to destroy me. Because nobody goes this far, risking public exposure, committing potential murder, unless they're protecting something much bigger than just family reputation. Ryland stared at her like he was seeing someone completely different from the invisible girl he'd chosen at the selection. "You're talking about investigating my grandmother, one of the most powerful women in the duchy, a woman who clearly has resources and connections we don't fully understand." "Yes. That's incredibly dangerous." "I know. It could get us both killed." "I know that too." Elara's voice didn't waver. "But I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of letting powerful people crush anyone who stands in their way. Your grandmother thinks I'm weak because I come from nothing. She thinks I'll break or run or disappear. So we're going to prove her wrong, together." Silence stretched between them, filled with smoke and uncertainty and the weight of impossible choices. Then Ryland did something that changed everything. He smiled, really smiled, the ice in his expression melting into something warm and fierce and absolutely unbreakable. "All right then." He squeezed her hands. "We fight." And standing in the ruins of the Dowager's attack, covered in ash and surrounded by the aftermath of attempted murder, Elara Vance made a silent promise. She would uncover every secret the Dowager was hiding. She would prove her mother's innocence and her own worth. And she would show the entire aristocracy that the girl nobody chose had become someone nobody could destroy, even if it killed her. The investigation began at dawn. Ryland had moved Elara to his private study, a fortress within the palace with guards he personally trusted stationed at every entrance. Mrs. Brennan was safely housed in the military wing under protection. Mrs. Aldridge had become their intelligence officer, coordinating a network of servants who were loyal to the duchy itself rather than the Dowager's personal authority. "We need to understand what we're actually looking for," Ryland said, spreading maps and documents across his desk. "My grandmother doesn't risk murder lightly. Whatever she's hiding, it's worth killing for." Elara studied the papers. Financial records, correspondence, estate documentation. Nothing obvious jumped out. "What do we know about her past? Before she became Dowager Duchess?" "She married my grandfather 45 years ago. Minor nobility, but wealthy. Her family controlled textile manufacturing in the southern provinces." Ryland tapped a document. "The marriage strengthened both houses significantly." "And after your grandfather died?" "She maintained control through my father, then after his death in the war, through her position as my guardian until I came of age." His expression darkened. "She's ruled this duchy for decades, either directly or through manipulation." Mrs. Aldridge entered carrying a tray of tea and something else, a small leather journal. This was hidden in a locked drawer in the destroyed quarters. The explosion missed it because it was in an iron safe. She handed it to Ryland, who opened it carefully. His expression shifted from curiosity to shock. "What is it?" Elara moved closer. "My grandfather's private journal, from the year before he died." Ryland's voice was tight. "I didn't know this existed." They read together, Ryland's finger tracing the faded ink. Most entries were mundane, estate business, social obligations, political maneuvering. But then, dated 3 months before the old duke's death, the tone changed. "Eugenia's spending has become excessive. Questioned her about withdrawals from duchy accounts. She claimed charitable donations but refused to provide documentation. Growing concerned." 2 weeks later. "Discovered correspondence between Eugenia and Lord Blackwell. Appears to be more than social courtesy. Confronted her. She denied impropriety but was evasive. Must investigate further." 1 week before his death. "Found evidence of falsified financial records. Eugenia has been embezzling from duchy funds for years. Confronted her again. She wept, begged forgiveness, claimed gambling debts. I want to believe her, but the amounts are staggering, tens of thousands. Where has it gone?" The final entry was dated the day before the Duke died. "Meeting with Eugenia and her family lawyer tomorrow. Will demand full accounting and restitution. If she cannot provide proof of where the money went, I may have no choice but to, The entry ended there. Incomplete. The old Duke had died the next day of sudden heart failure. Natural causes, the physicians had ruled. "She killed him," Elara whispered. "We don't know that." But Ryland's voice was hollow. Heart failure could have been genuine. Or induced. Poison that mimics natural death. Mrs. Aldridge's expression was grim. Your grandfather was threatening to expose her. She had motive. But why embezzle in the first place? Her position as Duchess gave her access to immense wealth. Ryland flipped through more pages. Why risk everything for money she already had? Unless it wasn't about money, Elara said slowly, pieces clicking together. Unless she needed the funds for something she couldn't request through normal duchy channels. Something secret. They stared at each other as the implication settled. We need to find Lord Blackwell, Ryland said. If he was involved 45 years ago, he might know what she was hiding. Your grandfather mentioned him in the context of more than social courtesy, Elara pointed out. Could they have been lovers? Possibly. Ryland was already moving toward his desk, pulling out current nobility registers. Blackwell. Blackwell. Here. Lord Edmund Blackwell, aged 73, residing in the Northern Estates. He looked up. That's 3 days' ride. Then we leave today. Elara, this could be dangerous. If my grandmother suspects we're investigating, she already tried to kill us with an explosion. How much more dangerous can it get? Elara straightened her shoulders. Besides, I'm not staying here as bait while you ride off. We're in this together, remember? Something warm flickered in Ryland's expression. Together. They departed within hours, traveling with a small, trusted military escort. The journey north took them through terrain that grew increasingly wild, forests giving way to rocky highlands, civilized estates replaced by rough countryside. Elara had never been this far from the capital, had never seen landscapes this raw and beautiful. Despite the danger, despite everything, part of her felt almost free. You're smiling, Ryland observed on the second day, riding alongside her. I've spent my entire life in the city, serving nobles who complained about the inconvenience of traveling to their country estates. She gestured at the rolling hills around them. I never thought I'd see any of this. Does it live up to expectations? Better. She glanced at him. You seem different out here, too, less rigid. The palace is a cage. Out here, he breathed deeply. Out here I can think clearly. Is that why you became a soldier? To escape? Partially. Also because my grandmother couldn't control military operations the way she controlled court politics. His expression hardened. Every decision I made, she tried to influence. Every alliance, every friendship, every aspect of my life. The army was the only place I had autonomy. Until the selection. Until the selection, he agreed. She orchestrated that too. Chose those 10 ladies specifically because they were all controllable through their families. Thought I'd pick whichever one she wanted and finally give her complete leverage over me. Then I ruined everything by existing. Then you saved everything by being real. He looked at her directly. I meant what I said at the ball. You're the first person in years who's treated me like a human being instead of a title or a strategic asset. The words hung in the air between them, warm and dangerous. Elara wanted to respond, to say something equally honest, but movement on the ridge ahead made her freeze. Riders, the lead guard called out. 6 men appeared on horseback, blocking the road. They weren't wearing military colors or noble insignia, just dark clothing and expressions that promised violence. Ryland's hand went to his sword instantly. Bandits or hired? Does it matter? Elara's heart was racing. The lead rider moved forward, a scarred man with cold eyes. His Grace the Duke, and the famous Miss Vance. My employer sends her regards. The Dowager. She'd sent assassins. Turn back now, Ryland commanded, his voice pure military authority. Or face the consequences. We have our orders. The scarred man drew his blade. Nothing personal. What happened next was brutal and fast. Ryland's soldiers engaged immediately, steel clashing against steel. Ryland himself fought like the war hero he was, precise, efficient, deadly. But they were outnumbered, and the attackers were professionals. One man broke through the line, heading straight for Elara. She'd never fought in her life. Had no training, no weapons. But she'd spent years learning to read people, anticipating movements, surviving by understanding threats before they materialized. When he swung his blade, she dove sideways, grabbed a fallen branch, and swung it with everything she had at his horse's legs. The horse reared. The man fell. Before he could recover, one of Ryland's soldiers was there, blade at the attacker's throat. The fight ended moments later. 3 assassins dead, 2 wounded and captured, 1 fled. Ryland's soldiers had taken injuries, but nothing fatal. Ryland crossed to Elara immediately, his face tight with concern. Are you hurt? No, you? I'm fine. He pulled her against him briefly, a gesture that felt more protective than strategic. That was insane and incredibly brave. I didn't think, I just survived. Like you always do. He released her, turning to the captured assassins. Get them talking. I want to know everything. Who hired them? What the orders were? What else the Dowager has planned? The interrogation was short but productive. The assassins had been hired through intermediaries, but the orders were clear: kill Elara Vance and make it look like an accident during travel. Rylan was to be left alive. Killing a duke would bring too much scrutiny. "She wants me dead, but you alive to suffer," Elara said quietly. "Then we make sure neither happens." Rylan's expression was pure determination. "We reach Blackwell, get the truth, and end this." They arrived at Lord Blackwell's estate the next afternoon, exhausted and battered, but alive. The manor was smaller than the palace, but beautifully maintained. Lord Blackwell himself was elderly, but sharp-eyed, greeting them with evident surprise. "Duke Crow, I wasn't expecting visitors." His gaze shifted to Elara. "And you must be the young lady everyone's talking about." "Lord Blackwell, we need to speak with you about Dowager Duchess Eugenia," Rylan said without preamble. "Specifically about your relationship with her 45 years ago." Blackwell's expression shuddered. "That's ancient history." "It's current necessity. My grandfather's journal indicates you and my grandmother were involved in something together, something significant enough that she's now trying to kill people to keep it hidden." "Kill people?" Blackwell's face went pale. Elara stepped forward. "She's already attempted my murder twice, destroyed evidence about my background. Your name appeared in documents right before the old duke died investigating embezzlement. Please, if you know anything about what she was hiding, we need to know now." Blackwell studied them both for a long moment. Then he sighed deeply and gestured toward his study. "Come inside. It's time this secret saw daylight." The study was warm and book-lined. Blackwell poured 3 glasses of brandy with shaking hands. "Eugenia and I were lovers," he said bluntly. "Before she married your grandfather, during the marriage, and for years after. It was passionate and destructive and wrong on every level." "The embezzled money?" Rylan prompted. "Went to me. To us." Blackwell took a long drink. "We had plans to run away together. Leave everything. Her marriage, my estates, all of it. The money was supposed to fund our new life somewhere distant, where no one knew us." "What stopped you?" "She got pregnant." The words dropped like stones. Elara's breath caught. "With your child?" "Yes." She was terrified. If your grandfather discovered she was carrying another man's baby, it would have destroyed everything. Her position, her reputation, possibly her life. Adultery by a duchess could be grounds for severe punishment. "What happened to the child?" Rylan's voice was carefully controlled. "She miscarried. Or so she told me." Blackwell's expression was haunted. 3 months into the pregnancy, she sent word that she'd lost the baby. Ended our affair immediately. Said it was a sign we were meant to stay in our respective lives. I never saw her again in any capacity beyond formal social obligations. "You didn't question it?" "I was heartbroken and guilty and relieved in equal measure. I accepted her decision and tried to move on." He paused. "But years later, rumors reached me. Servants' gossip, suggestions that there had been a birth, not a miscarriage, that Eugenia had sent a child away somewhere to be raised in secret." Elara's mind was racing. "If she had a child, an illegitimate heir, it would complicate succession," Rylan finished. "Potentially give that child a claim to duchy resources, or at minimum create a scandal that would destroy my grandmother's reputation and power." "There's more," Blackwell said quietly. "The timing of your grandfather's death. I always wondered. He was investigating the missing money right when Eugenia would have been most desperate to keep her secrets hidden, and he died so conveniently." "You think she murdered him?" "I think she's capable of it. I thought so then. I think so now." Blackwell met Rylan's eyes. "Your grandmother is one of the most ruthless people I've ever known. If she had a secret child somewhere, and if that child could threaten everything she's built, she'd kill to protect it," Elara whispered, "just like she's trying to kill me now." "But why you?" Blackwell looked confused. "What threat do you pose to a 40-year-old secret?" "Because I'm investigating her," Rylan said. "Because Elara stood up to her publicly and won. Because we're the first people in decades who haven't bent to her control. She can't risk us digging deeper and finding—" He stopped abruptly. "What?" Elara prompted. "The child. If it exists, if it survived, it would be around 40 years old now." His expression shifted to something like horror. Someone connected to the duchy. Someone she'd want to keep close but hidden. Someone whose real parentage she'd go to any lengths to conceal. They stared at each other as the implication settled. We need to go back, Elara said. We need to search duchy records for anyone the right age who appeared in the household suddenly. Adopted children, wards, distant relatives who arrived without clear lineage. I can help, Blackwell offered. I kept correspondence from that period. Letters, documents. If there are clues to the child's identity or location, they might be in my archives. They spent the next 12 hours buried in papers. Letters between Blackwell and Eugenia from 4 decades ago, filled with passion and planning, and toward the end, fear. Financial records showing the embezzled money being transferred in stages. And then, here. Rylan held up a letter dated 9 months after the supposed miscarriage. From Eugenia to Blackwell. She says, the matter is resolved. The burden has been placed with those who will keep silent. You and I must never speak of this again. The burden, Elara repeated. She's talking about the child. It wasn't a miscarriage. She gave birth and placed the baby somewhere. But where? With whom? Rylan shuffled through more papers. There's no indication. Wait. He'd found another document. This is a payment record to a family named Hastings. 5,000 in gold, dated the same month as that letter, with the notation for services rendered and future silence. Elara's blood went cold. Hastings. Lady Margot Hastings, the woman I served as companion. How old is Lady Margot? Early 40s. I never knew her exact age, but understanding crashed over her like a wave. She appeared in society suddenly about 20 years ago, married quickly into minor nobility. No one questioned her background because she had enough money to make questions impolite. The dowager's money, Rylan breathed. She's been funding Margot's lifestyle for decades, keeping her secret child close but hidden in plain sight. And if anyone discovered the truth, Elara's mind was racing through implications. Margot could claim legitimacy, could argue that as Eugenia's biological daughter, she deserves recognition, inheritance, status, which would destroy my grandmother's reputation and potentially complicate duchy succession, Rylan finished. This is what she's been protecting. This is why she's willing to commit murder. They had the truth. Finally, completely, they had it. We need proof, Elara said. Beyond letters and speculation, we need evidence that will hold up in court. Birth records, witnesses, something irrefutable. The midwife, Blackwell said suddenly. Eugenia would have needed someone to deliver the baby in secret, someone she trusted absolutely. If we could find that person. After 40 years? Rylan looked skeptical. People keep secrets, but they also keep records. Midwives especially, it's their protection against accusations of malpractice. Blackwell stood. I may know where to start looking. The search took 2 more days of intense investigation. Blackwell used his connections among the northern nobility to track down retired servants who might have served in the dowager's household during the relevant period. Most were dead. Some had dementia. But one, an elderly woman named Clara, who'd been a lady's maid, remembered. The Duchess disappeared for 6 months, Clara said, sitting in her small cottage by the fire. Claimed she was taking a rest cure at a coastal estate for her health. But I went with her. And it wasn't a rest cure. She was pregnant, hiding it. Did you see the birth? Elara asked gently. I was there. Helped the midwife. A girl baby, healthy and screaming. The Duchess wouldn't even hold her, just told the midwife to take her away immediately. Clara's expression was sad. I felt sorry for that little thing, born and rejected in the same moment. The midwife's name? Martha Green. She was paid handsomely for her silence, moved away shortly after. I heard she settled somewhere in the eastern provinces. Don't know if she's still alive. But Martha Green was alive. They found her 3 days later in a small coastal town, living quietly off savings that had mysteriously never depleted. When confronted with the dowager's name, her face went pale. I swore I'd never speak of it. That oath is protecting a murderer, Rylan said bluntly. My grandmother has attempted to kill Miss Vance twice now to keep this secret. How many more deaths are worth your silence? Martha's resolve crumbled. I have records. The birth certificate I was required to file even for secret births. It's the law for midwives. I kept a copy in case she ever tried to claim I'd done something illegal. The document was faded but legible. Birth certificate for an unnamed female infant, mother listed as Eugenia Crow, father unknown. Date matching their timeline exactly. Witness signature, Martha Green, certified midwife. It was proof. Irrefutable legal proof. She gave the baby to the Hastings family, Martha confirmed. They were desperate for a child and willing to stay silent for the right price. Named her Margot. They had everything they needed. The ride back to the capital was tense with anticipation and fear. They'd uncovered the dowager's deepest secret, but cornering a desperate, powerful woman was possibly the most dangerous thing they could do. She'll deny everything, Elara said as the palace came into view. Claim the documents are forged. Probably, Rylan agreed. But the truth is out there now. Multiple witnesses, physical evidence. Even if she fights, the damage to her reputation will be catastrophic. What happens to Margot? That depends on what she wants. If she demands recognition as Eugenia's daughter, it becomes a legal battle. If she chooses to maintain her current life, he shrugged. The secret stays mostly secret, but my grandmother loses her leverage. They entered the palace to find it in chaos. Mrs. Aldridge met them in the entry hall, her face grave. Thank goodness you're back. The Dowager has called an emergency council session. She's claiming you've been conspiring against the duchy, attempting to undermine legitimate authority. She's demanding your arrest, Your Grace. On what grounds? Treason. She's fabricated evidence that you've been working with foreign powers to weaken duchy defenses. Mrs. Aldridge handed him a stack of documents. Forged correspondence, false testimony. It's all lies, but she's presented it to the council with enough conviction that they're taking it seriously. Ryland's expression went deadly calm. When is this council session? Happening now, in the Great Hall. She's waiting for you to arrive so she can spring the trap publicly. Then let's not disappoint her. He turned to Elara. Stay here. This could get... No! Elara's voice was absolute. We end this together. That was always the plan. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Together. They walked into the Great Hall side by side, carrying the documents that would destroy the Dowager's world. The council was assembled, 24 of the duchy's most powerful nobles, all seated in judgment. The Dowager stood at the center like a prosecutor, her expression triumphant. Duke Crow, how kind of you to finally appear. We've been discussing your recent activities. Have you? Ryland's tone was ice. And what conclusions have you reached? That you've been compromised by foreign interests, by... Her gaze slid to Elara with pure venom. Inappropriate relationships that cloud your judgment. That you're unfit to lead this duchy and must be removed from power for the good of the realm. Gasps rippled through the council. This was beyond political maneuvering. This was a coup. Those are serious accusations, grandmother. I assume you have proof? Extensive proof. She gestured to the documents on the council table. Correspondence with enemy nations. Financial records showing payments from foreign sources. Testimony from reliable witnesses about your erratic behavior and questionable associations. All forgeries, Ryland said calmly. Every single document. You would say that. A guilty man always claims innocence. Then let's discuss evidence. Ryland placed his own documents on the table. Starting with a birth certificate from 40 years ago, showing that you, Eugenia Crow, gave birth to an illegitimate daughter and hid her existence through embezzlement, bribery, and eventually murder. The color drained from the Dowager's face. That's absurd, is it? Elara stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. Then explain the payment records to the Hastings family. Explain the testimony from Martha Green, the midwife who delivered your daughter. Explain the letters to Lord Blackwell discussing the burden being placed with those who would keep silent. The council members were reading the documents now, their expressions shifting from skepticism to shock. Lady Margot Hastings is your biological daughter, Ryland continued, born from an affair with Lord Blackwell while you were married to my grandfather. You embezzled duchy funds to pay for her secret upbringing, and when my grandfather discovered the theft and began investigating, you murdered him to keep the truth hidden. Lies. All lies. The Dowager's composure was shattering. You fabricated this to what? Save myself from your fabricated treason charges? Ryland's voice was sharp. We have witnesses, grandmother, multiple witnesses willing to testify, including your own former maid and the midwife who kept records as required by law. This isn't fabrication, this is truth. Lord Pemberton, sitting among the council members, spoke up. If these allegations are accurate, this is unprecedented. A dowager duchess committing adultery, embezzlement, possibly murder. They're not allegations, Elara said quietly. They're facts. Documented, witnessed facts. And the reason she's trying to remove Duke Crow from power is because we discovered them. Because we wouldn't stop investigating. Because we refused to let her continue hiding behind lies and violence. The dowager stood frozen, her carefully constructed power crumbling around her. I want to speak with Lady Margot, one council member said. If she's truly the dowager's daughter, she deserves to be heard. Lady Margot is being brought here now, Mrs. Aldridge said from the doorway. I took the liberty of summoning her when the Duke and Miss Vance returned. Margot entered moments later, her expression confused and frightened. What's happening? I was told there was an emergency. She stopped when she saw the dowager. The resemblance was subtle but undeniable now that people were looking for it. Same sharp features, same fierce eyes. Lady Margot, Ryland said gently, we need to ask you some questions about your childhood, about the family who raised you and where you came from. Margot's face went pale. I don't understand. Did they ever tell you that you were adopted? Elara asked. That your birth mother was someone else? Margot's silence was answer enough. They told me never to ask, she whispered finally. Never to question. That it was for my own protection. I always thought there was something wrong with me. Some shame I didn't understand. There's nothing wrong with you, Elara said firmly. But the woman who gave birth to you has spent 40 years hiding the truth. And she's hurt people, killed people, to keep that secret buried. Margot turned to look at the dowager, her expression a mixture of shock, pain, and dawning understanding. Is it true? Are you my mother? The dowager's face crumpled. For the first time since Elara had known her, the woman looked old, defeated. Yes. The single word shattered the last of her power. The council erupted in shocked discussion. The dowager sank into a chair, no longer the formidable force who'd ruled through fear and manipulation, just a woman whose secrets had finally consumed her. This council will need time to determine appropriate consequences, Lord Pemberton said, taking charge of the chaos. But it's clear that the treason accusations against Duke Crow are baseless, and that Dowager Duchess Eugenia faces serious charges herself. What happens to me? Margot asked, her voice small. That's your choice, Ryland said. You can claim recognition as Eugenia's daughter if you wish, or maintain your current identity. Either way, the payments she's been making to keep you silent will continue, not as hush money, but as what you're owed as her child. Margot looked at the dowager, then at the council, then at Elara. I need time to think, to process. It's too much. Of course, Elara said gently. Take all the time you need. As Margot was escorted out, the council began discussing next steps. The dowager would face investigation for embezzlement and possible murder. Her position as dowager would be revoked. Her influence over duchy affairs ended. Elara and Ryland stood together at the edge of the hall, watching justice finally catch up to the woman who'd tormented them both. It's over, Elara said softly. This part is. Ryland looked at her. But there's still the question of us. Us? Our arrangement. The strategic marriage. With my grandmother's power broken, I don't need... He stopped, struggling with words. What I mean is, you're free. If you want to end the betrothal, I'll support that decision. Give you everything we discussed. Money, freedom, a fresh start somewhere. Elara's heart was pounding. This was it. The chance to walk away. Return to a simple life without court politics or assassination attempts or constant warfare. She could be free. But when she looked at Ryland, at the man who'd chosen her when she was invisible, who'd fought beside her when anyone else would have abandoned her, who'd trusted her with his deepest secrets and his most dangerous battles, she realized she didn't want freedom from this. She wanted freedom with him. What if I don't want to end it? she asked quietly. His expression shifted. Hope, fear, and something deeper flickering across his face. Then I would say he took her hands. That somewhere between a selection ball and a council trial, this stopped being strategic for me. That I've fallen in love with the woman who refuses to disappear, who stands up to dowagers and assassins with equal courage, who makes me believe that maybe partnership can be more than political alliance. Rylan, you don't have to answer now. Take time. Think about... She kissed him. Right there in the great hall, in front of the council and the witnesses and everyone who'd said she didn't belong. And when she pulled back, she was smiling. I don't need time. I chose you at the selection, even when I was terrified. I choose you now, not because I have to, because I want to. He kissed her back, and the council pretended very hard not to notice, though several members were definitely smiling. The girl nobody chose had chosen her own path, and this time she chose love. The wedding was 3 months away. 3 months during which the entire duchy transformed around Elara like a landscape reshaping itself after an earthquake. The dowager had been stripped of her title and confined to a remote estate pending formal charges. The council had voted unanimously to recognize Rylan's full authority as duke without interference. And Elara was learning what it meant to stop hiding. Your posture is perfect now, Lord Pemberton observed during one of their final lessons. You've mastered every form of address, every protocol, every subtle dance of court politics. I have nothing left to teach you. Does that mean I'm dismissed? Elara asked with a slight smile. It means you've graduated from student to duchess in training, a much more terrifying position, if I'm honest. But his expression was warm. You've exceeded every expectation, Miss Vance, including mine. The transformation wasn't just in skills. It was in how people looked at her. Nobles who'd turned their backs now bowed respectfully. Ladies who'd mocked her now sought her favor. Invitations flooded in, teas, luncheons, charitable events, every social gathering of importance. Some were genuine, many were strategic, all of them required navigation. Lady Cordelia has invited us to her estate for a weekend, Mrs. Aldridge mentioned one morning, sorting through the latest stack of correspondence. Should I decline? Accept, Elara said, surprising herself with the decision. She was cruel, but she was also honest about it. I prefer honest enemies to false friends. Mrs. Aldridge smiled. You're learning to think like a duchess, or just like someone who's tired of games. But the biggest change was in her relationship with Margot. They met for tea one week after the council revelation, both of them nervous, both unsure how to navigate the wreckage of their former dynamic. Margot arrived at the palace looking smaller than Elara remembered, less commanding. Thank you for agreeing to see me, Margot said quietly, accepting a cup with hands that trembled slightly. Of course. Elara had chosen a small private sitting room, no servants, no witnesses, just two women trying to find honesty in the ruins of lies. How are you managing? Margot's composure cracked. I don't know who I am anymore. Everything I thought I knew about my family, my background, my entire life. It was built on secrets and money paid to keep me hidden. I know something about being hidden, Elara said gently. But you chose to step into the light. I was forced into it. Margot set down her cup. I need to apologize for how I treated you, the casual cruelty, the dismissiveness. You were never a servant to me. You were just invisible, and I used that. I'm sorry. The apology was unexpected, real. I accept your apology, Elara said, but I need you to understand something. What the dowager did to you wasn't your fault. Being hidden, being lied to, that was done to you, not by you. You don't have to carry shame for her choices. Margot's eyes filled with tears. Everyone will judge me. They already are. The illegitimate daughter of a disgraced duchess and a lord who abandoned me. Let them judge. You know who you are now, and you get to decide who you become next. Elara leaned forward. You have money, independence, and the truth on your side. That's more power than most people ever get. What you do with it, that's your choice. They talked for 2 hours. not as former employer and servant, not as victim and bystander, but as two women who'd both survived being treated as less than they were. When Margot left, something had shifted. Not quite friendship, but understanding, and the beginning of mutual respect. The weeks rolled forward with relentless momentum. Wedding preparations consumed every day. Fabrics chosen, menus planned, guest lists debated. Madame Rousseau created a wedding gown that was both traditional and revolutionary, incorporating subtle nods to Elara's working-class background through the embroidery patterns. "You're honoring where you came from," the seamstress explained, pointing to tiny needle and thread symbols worked into the silver detailing, "while claiming where you're going." But the real battle wasn't with fabric and flowers. It was with the scars that remained. 2 weeks before the wedding, Elara woke screaming from a nightmare. Assassins in the dark, explosions, her mother's memory being destroyed again and again while she stood helpless. Relan was there instantly, holding her while she shook. "They're gone," he murmured. "You're safe. I promise." "I know. Logically, I know." She pressed her face against his shoulder. "But my mind hasn't caught up with reality yet. Mine either." His admission surprised her. "I still expect my grandmother to appear around every corner, still brace for the next manipulation, the next attack. Fear doesn't disappear just because the threat is gone." "How do you deal with it?" "I remember that I'm not alone anymore, that I have someone who understands." He pulled back to look at her. "We survived together, Elara. We can heal together, too." The healing was slow work, but it was work they did side by side. 5 days before the wedding, an unexpected visitor arrived at the palace. "Mrs. Brennan is here to see you," Mrs. Aldridge announced. "She's brought something she says you need to see." The elderly woman was shown into Elara's sitting room carrying a worn wooden box. "Child, I've been going through my things, preparing to sell the old boarding house and move somewhere quieter." She set the box on the table. "And I found this, locked away in storage. It belonged to your mother." Elara's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were treasures she'd thought lost forever. Her mother's sewing tools, carefully preserved, a journal filled with her elegant handwriting, thoughts, dreams, small observations about daily life. And at the bottom, wrapped in cloth, a collection of letters. Letters Margaret Vance had written to her daughter over the years, planning to give them to Elara when she came of age. Letters she'd never had the chance to deliver before she died. Elara read through tears, her mother's voice coming alive again through ink and paper. "My dearest Elara, you are 7 today, and already I see such strength in you. The world will try to make you small. Don't let it. Take up space. Demand to be seen. You matter more than you know. You asked me today why we're poor when other people have so much. I told you that wealth and worth aren't the same thing. We may not have money, but we have honesty, kindness, and each other. Those are riches that can't be stolen. I'm teaching you to sew today, and you're frustrated that your stitches aren't perfect. Remember, my love, everything worth doing requires practice. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep trying." The final letter was dated a week before her mother's death. "My darling girl, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I couldn't stay longer, couldn't see you grow into the woman I know you'll become. But I need you to know this. You were never a burden. You were never too much or not enough. You were exactly right, exactly yourself. And I was proud of you every single day. Be brave, be kind, be true, and know that I loved you more than words can say." Elara sat in the quiet sitting room, holding her mother's words against her heart, and felt something fundamental shift inside her. She'd been carrying shame about her background for so long, shame that intensified when the dowager tried to weaponize it. But reading her mother's love, her mother's pride, her mother's unwavering belief, there was nothing shameful about being Margaret Vance's daughter. There never had been. "Thank you," she whispered to Mrs. Brennan, who'd waited quietly while she read. "Thank you for keeping these safe. Your mother was a good woman. The world should know that." Mrs. Brennan patted her hand. "And I think she'd be so proud of who you've become." That night, Elara made a decision. She found Rylan in his study, reviewing military reports. He looked up when she entered, immediately setting aside his work. "What's wrong?" Nothing's wrong, but I need your help with something. She placed her mother's letters on his desk. I want to establish a foundation, in my mother's name, to help working women, seamstresses, servants, anyone struggling to survive in a system that treats them as invisible. Education funding, job training, emergency support, everything my mother needed and never received. Ryland studied her face. That's a significant undertaking. It would require substantial funds and considerable time. I know, which is why I need to know if you'd support it, as my husband, as Duke, because this isn't just about me anymore. It's about using the power we have to help people who don't have any. He stood, crossed to her, took her hands in his. Yes, absolutely yes. We'll fund it from Duchy resources. Make it a permanent institution. His expression was fierce with pride. Your mother raised someone extraordinary. Let's make sure the world knows it. They spent the next 3 days planning. Mrs. Aldridge helped coordinate logistics. Lord Pemberton advised on political navigation. Even Margot contributed, offering to serve on the foundation board. I understand what it's like to be trapped by circumstances beyond your control, Margot said. If I can help others escape that trap, then maybe something good comes from my mother's terrible choices. The foundation would be announced at the wedding, a public declaration that Duchess Elara Crowe would not forget where she came from or who she'd been. The morning of the wedding arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, warm sun, just enough breeze to be pleasant. The cathedral was filled with 600 nobles, military officers, foreign dignitaries, and in the back rows carefully placed among the aristocracy. Working people, servants, merchants, craftspeople, the invisible ones who kept society running but were never invited to witness its grandest moments. Elara had insisted. If she was being celebrated, then the people like her mother, the ones who worked and struggled and survived, would be there to see it. Mrs. Aldridge helped her dress in the wedding gown, the needle and thread symbols catching morning light. You look like a queen, the older woman said softly. I feel like I'm about to face another battle. Marriage to a duke? You absolutely are. But Mrs. Aldridge smiled. Though I suspect you and His Grace will fight most of your battles together. That's the difference between strategic alliances and real partnerships. I love him, Elara said quietly. I didn't expect to, but somewhere between explosions and council trials, I fell completely in love with him. He loves you too. Anyone with eyes can see it. Mrs. Aldridge adjusted the veil. Now go show that cathedral full of nobles that the girl they underestimated has become someone they'll never forget. The processional music began. Elara walked alone down the aisle. No father to give her away, no family to represent. Just herself, claiming her own future with each step. The nobles watched with mixed expressions. Some respectful, some still skeptical, some openly curious about how this impossible story would end. But Elara didn't care about their judgment anymore. She'd learned that their opinions didn't define her worth. Their acceptance didn't determine her value. She was Margaret Vance's daughter, and that meant she was already more than enough. Ryland waited at the altar in full military dress, his expression transforming when he saw her. Not the ice-cold Duke, not the battle-scarred commander, just a man looking at the woman he loved with absolute wonder. When she reached him, he whispered, "You're beautiful. You're not so bad yourself. I'm terrified." Me too. Want to run away together? After the vows, I worked too hard on this dress to waste it. He almost laughed, that rare, genuine expression she treasured. The ceremony was traditional with one notable exception. When the priest asked if anyone objected to the union, Lady Cordelia stood. The cathedral went silent. Elara's heart stopped. After everything, was this the final betrayal? But Cordelia's voice was clear and strong. I don't object. I wish to speak in support. Shocked murmurs rippled through the crowd. I was one of the 10 ladies rejected at the selection, Cordelia continued. I was angry, humiliated, convinced that Miss Vance had somehow manipulated the Duke. I was wrong. She looked directly at Elara. You didn't manipulate anything. You simply were yourself, honest, brave, and real, in a room full of people performing, and Duke Crowe saw that. We all should have. She sat down, and the whispers intensified. Then another voice. Lord Pemberton, I trained Miss Vance in court etiquette. I expected to polish surface manners on someone fundamentally unsuitable. Instead, I discovered someone with natural intelligence, fierce determination, and genuine grace. She earned her place here through merit, not manipulation. Another voice, Mrs. Brennan, standing in the back rows. I knew Margaret Vance, this bride's mother. A finer woman never lived, and her daughter has honored that legacy by refusing to pretend she came from anywhere but working-class truth. That's not shame. That's courage. One by one, voices rose. Not everyone, not even most, but enough people, noble and common alike, speaking truth instead of maintaining polite silence, speaking support instead of whispered judgment. The priest, slightly flustered by the unprecedented interruption, cleared his throat. Well, I believe that settles any concerns about this union. Shall we proceed? The vows were simple. Traditional words about partnership, loyalty, love. But when Elara spoke them, looking into Ryland's eyes, they meant everything. I, Elara Vance, take you, Ryland Crow, to be my husband, to stand beside you in battle and in peace, to choose you every day, the way you first chose me. I, Ryland Crow, take you, Elara Vance, to be my wife, to protect your truth, to honor your strength, and to love the woman who taught me that real power comes from being genuine in a world of masks. When they kissed, the cathedral erupted in applause. Not polite noble clapping, real celebration. The reception that followed was magnificent. Tables overflowing with food, music that filled the massive ballroom, nobles and commoners mingling in ways that would have been unthinkable months ago. During the formal toasts, Ryland stood to make an announcement. My wife and I are establishing the Margaret Vance Foundation, dedicated to supporting working women through education, training, and emergency assistance. We're committing substantial duchy resources to ensure that no woman has to struggle the way Elara's mother did, that those who work hardest have support when they need it most. The applause was thunderous, and in that moment Elara saw her mother's legacy transformed from private memory to public mission. Later, during the dancing, Margot approached. May I speak with you both? They moved to a quieter corner. Margot looked nervous but determined. I've made a decision about my situation, about my mother, about the dowager. You don't have to tell us, Ryland said gently. I want to. Margot took a breath. I'm claiming recognition as Eugenia's daughter. Not for status or inheritance, but because hiding the truth is what caused all this damage. My mother spent 40 years protecting a secret that destroyed lives. I won't perpetuate that pattern. That's brave, Elara said. I learned from watching you, from seeing what happens when someone refuses to be invisible. Margot's expression was determined. I'm also testifying against her in the investigation, about the payments, the manipulation, everything I know. She destroyed too many lives protecting her reputation. That ends now. She'll hate you for it, Ryland warned. She already abandoned me at birth. Her hate can't hurt more than that already has. Margot straightened her shoulders. Besides, I'm done letting powerful people make me small. I'm claiming my truth, just like Elara claimed hers. After Margot left, Elara leaned against Ryland. We're changing things, aren't we? Really changing them. You're changing things. I'm just trying to keep up. He pulled her into a dance. The foundation, the wedding that mixed classes, Margot finding her voice, it's all because you refused to stay invisible. We did it together. We did. He spun her gracefully. And we'll keep doing it, building something better than what we inherited. The evening wound down with speeches, more dancing, and finally the traditional departure of the bride and groom. But before they left, Elara made one more stop. She found the group of working people who'd attended, servants, merchants, craftspeople, gathered near the refreshment tables, looking slightly overwhelmed by the grandeur around them. Thank you for coming, she said simply. An older seamstress, someone who'd known her mother, stepped forward. We came to honor Margaret and to see what her daughter became. I became someone who remembers, who won't forget where she came from or who helped her along the way. Elara's voice was strong. The foundation will start accepting applications next month. Spread the word. No one should have to struggle alone the way my mother did. The seamstress nodded, tears in her eyes. She'd be so proud. I hope so. As Elara and Rylan finally left the reception, heading toward the ducal apartments that were now truly theirs, she felt something settle into place. Not perfection, not complete healing, but purpose. She'd survived being invisible, survived assassination attempts and social warfare, survived having every aspect of her background weaponized against her, and she'd transformed all that survival into power. Not the kind of power the Dowager had wielded, built on secrets and fear and control, but power rooted in truth, courage, and the determination to lift others as she'd been lifted. In their private chambers, away from witnesses and ceremony, Rylan pulled her close. No regrets? About what? Accepting your impossible proposal? Facing down your terrifying grandmother? Nearly being murdered several times? She smiled. Not even one. Good, because I have a confession. Oh? That night at the selection, I didn't choose you randomly. I'd been watching you all evening, watching you observe everything with this quiet intelligence, and I thought, there's someone real, someone who isn't performing. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. I knew it was insane, knew it would cause chaos, but I chose you anyway because I couldn't imagine choosing anyone else. You saved me that night, Elara said softly. Even though I was terrified, even though I didn't understand, you gave me a chance to stop being invisible, to become who I was always meant to be. You saved yourself. I just gave you the opportunity. We saved each other. She kissed him. And now we get to build something new together, a duchy that values truth over tradition. That lifts up the struggling instead of crushing them. That sounds exhausting, Rylan interrupted with a slight smile. Can we start tomorrow? Tonight? I'd rather just be with my wife. Your wife? She tested the words. I'm a duchess now. You were always a duchess. The title just finally caught up with the reality. They spent their wedding night not discussing politics or strategy or the next battle, just being together, being honest, being real. And in the morning, when Elara woke in the massive ducal bed, she didn't feel like an imposter or a servant pretending to belong. She felt like exactly who she was. 3 months later, the Dowager's trial concluded. She was found guilty of embezzlement and complicity in the old duke's death. Not proven murder, but enough evidence of poisoning to warrant serious punishment. She was stripped of all titles and assets, sentenced to permanent exile in a remote convent. Margot testified with devastating honesty. When it was over, she approached the Dowager one final time. I forgive you for abandoning me, she said quietly. Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry your choices as my burden anymore. You don't get to define my worth. The Dowager had nothing to say. Her power was gone, her secrets exposed, her legacy destroyed by the very people she'd tried to crush. The Margaret Vance Foundation opened its doors the same week. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of applications from women desperate for support, for education, for a chance to break free from circumstances that trapped them. Elara worked tirelessly, reviewing applications, distributing funds, creating programs. Rylan supported her completely, redirecting duchy resources and using his military connections to create job opportunities. Together, they became known not for scandal or selection balls, but for genuine change. 6 months after the wedding, Lady Cordelia invited them to dinner at her estate. The evening was surprisingly pleasant. Conversation about shared interests, honest discussion of court politics, even laughter. As they prepared to leave, Cordelia walked them to their carriage. I owe you an apology, she said, not just for my cruelty at the selection, but for my entire worldview. I thought power came from wealth and status. You've shown me it comes from integrity and courage. She paused. I'm establishing my own foundation for maritime workers, the sailors and dock workers who make my family's shipping empire possible but receive none of its benefits. If you'd be willing to advise, we'd be honored, Elara said. It wasn't friendship exactly, but it was respect and the beginning of alliance. 1 year after the selection, Elara stood in the Grand Hall, the same space where the Dowager had tried to destroy her with false accusations. But this time, she was hosting a gala for the Foundation's anniversary. 500 people filled the hall, nobles and commoners, former enemies and new allies, women who'd been helped by the Foundation sharing their stories of transformation. Mrs. Brennan was there, honored as a special guest. Mrs. Aldridge had been promoted to Duchess's Chief of Staff. Lord Pemberton served as the Foundation's education advisor. Even Margot attended, now running her own charitable organization and publicly acknowledged as Eugenia's daughter, not with shame, but with quiet dignity. Ryland found Elara standing near the window, taking a moment away from the crowds. "You look thoughtful." "I was remembering the selection, standing in the shadows, trying to be invisible, certain I didn't belong." She turned to him. "And now I'm hosting a gala in the grand hall of the Ducal Palace. It's surreal." "You always belonged. The world just needed time to realize it." He wrapped his arms around her from behind. "I have news, by the way." "Good news or complicated news?" "Good. The Council has voted to expand the Foundation's charter. We can now operate in all the Duchy's territories, not just the capital. Your mother's legacy will reach thousands more women." Elara felt tears prick her eyes. She would have loved this, helping others, making a difference. "She did make a difference. She raised you." Ryland's voice was gentle. "And you're transforming an entire duchy because of what she taught you." The gala continued around them, music and conversation, celebration and connection. And standing in that grand hall, surrounded by the life she'd built from nothing but honesty and courage, Elara felt something profound, peace. Not because every battle was won, not because every problem was solved, but because she knew, finally and completely, who she was. She was Margaret Vance's daughter. She was Ryland Crow's wife and partner. She was a duchess who'd earned her title through trial by fire, and she was exactly enough. 2 years after the selection, on the anniversary of that impossible night when everything changed, Ryland took Elara back to the ballroom where they'd first met. "Why are we here?" she asked, looking around the empty space. "Because I want to recreate a moment, but do it right this time." He held out his hand. "Miss Elara Vance, would you do me the honor of this dance?" She laughed. "We're already married, Your Grace." "I know, but that night I chose you so tactically, so strategically. I want to choose you again, romantically, completely, with full knowledge of who you are and how extraordinary you've become." "And who I was then? The companion girl standing in the shadows?" "She was extraordinary too. I just didn't have the words to tell her." He pulled her into dance position. "So I'm telling you now. I choose you, Elara, not for strategy, not for rebellion, but because you're the bravest, most genuine person I've ever known. And I love you more than I thought I could love anyone." They danced in the empty ballroom, no orchestra, no audience, just two people who'd survived impossible odds to find something real. "I choose you too," Elara said softly. "Every day, every moment. You saw me when I was invisible. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You made me want to stop hiding. You were never truly invisible, just waiting for the right moment to step into the light. And now? Now you're the light. For me. For the women you help. For everyone who needs to see that invisible people can become powerful. That truth matters more than tradition. That courage changes everything." They kissed in that ballroom where their story began, and Elara thought of all the impossible things that had happened since. A duke choosing a nobody, a servant becoming a duchess, a woman refusing to disappear, a love born from strategy but blooming into something real, a legacy built on truth instead of secrets. And somewhere she hoped her mother was watching, proud of the girl who'd refused to stay small, who'd taken up space, who'd demanded to be seen, who'd become exactly who she was always meant to be. The girl nobody chose had chosen herself, and in doing so, she'd changed everything. Years later, when people told the story of Duke Ryland Crow and his Duchess, they always focused on the impossible romance. The selection that shocked a kingdom. The love that defied all logic. But those who truly understood knew the story wasn't about a duke choosing a servant. It was about a woman choosing herself, about Elara Vance, seamstress's daughter, invisible companion, rejected by society, deciding she was worth more than the world had told her, worth fighting for, worth believing in, worth everything. She built a foundation that helped thousands, transformed duchy policies, raised children who knew their grandmother's story, and understood that worthiness came from character, not birth. She lived a long life filled with purpose, partnership, and the kind of love that only grows deeper with time. And when she died, decades later, surrounded by family and friends, and the legacy she'd created, her final words were simple. I mattered, I was seen, I made a difference. The invisible girl had become unforgettable, and the world was better for it.